After the adrenaline finally wore off, we returned once again to the small courtyard, where Lin calmly poured White Divine a cup of tea. Still, he couldn't help but wonder if they went just a little too far, because after all, Yin Ri just happened to be a divine-level professional as well. White Divine snorts and remarks that anyone who colludes with demons are enemy, and they are just trash that no longer counts as human. Furthermore, he adds that this wasn't just about punishment. It was more about sending a warning shot to every other nation, telling them to stop pulling shady moves behind the scenes and coming after Lin. Lin falls silent for a moment, then nods and says he understands, while at the same time realizing perhaps he's not strong enough. Meanwhile, White Divine reminds our boy that the opening of the Kunlun Mountain dungeon is right around the corner. He then tells him that the timing couldn't be better, and that this dungeon fits Lin's current level perfectly. The scene shifts to the Kunlun Mountain range. The place is locked in ice and snow, brutal enough to make most people regret their life choices, yet many professionals are still slowly scattered across the mountains. Compared to them, Lin stands out the most. After all, in weather like this, someone casually wearing a plain white shirt is just built differently. Some people ask what level he is, others quietly guess he must be a support or life class professional, while genuinely confused about why he's even here without a team. Lin pays no attention to the gossip and keeps moving toward his destination. Not long after, he reaches the dungeon entrance, where even more teams have already set up tents and are lighting campfires. Someone notices him and asks if he isn't freezing. Another person remarks that Lin looks like a life class professional who got separated from his team and even offers to escort him down the mountain, clearly worried for him. Lin smiles, tells them thanks, and says he's actually here to clear the dungeon. That answer catches them off guard. One of them awkwardly notes that, based on Lin's outfit, they really thought he was a non-combat professional and wondered where his teammates were. Seeing that Lin looks like a newbie, the two kindly explain the situation anyway. Apparently, the Kunlun Palace dungeon has 3 stages in total. The area they're in right now is the foothills, where he can enter the first stage, and also the easiest one. Even so, they remind him that professionals from other countries have been causing trouble lately, so he and his team should stay alert. Lin smiles again and tells them thanks. Anyway, he turns around and heads straight for the entrance alone. As soon as he touches the crystal at the gate, the dungeon information appears. A level 55 dungeon with a party limit of 12. Nothing too wild on paper. The two professionals saw Lin suddenly vanish into the entrance. They subconsciously rub their eyes, wondering if they're tripping and if the kid really just went in solo. One of them remarks that this is Kunlun Palace, and after all these years, nobody has ever cleared it solo. The other just laughs and tells the captain that young people like this, who clearly don't know their limits, usually tap out real fast once reality hits. The scene shifts again, and this time we're inside the dungeon. Honestly, it doesn't look much different from the outside, just an endless stretch of ice and snow. However, Lin quickly notes his health starts ticking down the moment he steps in. He immediately throws on a layer of skeletal armor and realizes that once inside the dungeon, he's constantly taking 2 types of damage: extreme cold and snowstorm effects. The damage itself isn't crazy, but if this were another same-level professional, they'd be cooked after dragging it out too long. Lin's goal is clear. Based on what his teacher tells him, this dungeon has 3 stages, and only by scoring high enough in every stage can the final hidden gate be unlocked. The moment he takes his first step forward, a massive hourglass appears in midair and starts counting down. Looks like it's time to get a little serious. Before long, the first wave of monsters shows up. Level 56 ice lions and snow wolves. Unfortunately for them, their stats are straight up sad. To Lin, right now, they're low-key paper mobs. 2 ranged skills go out, and the entire group gets deleted on the spot. He gains some experience, but he also notes that if he wants a faster clear, he'll have to rely on the good old corpse explosion. He starts pulling monsters together, then uses corpse explosion to wipe them out efficiently. System notifications begin popping off non-stop, basically flooding his vision. Time keeps moving, and the bottom of the hourglass starts filling up bit by bit. Then suddenly the entire dungeon begins to shake. Based on past experience, Lin already knows what that means. Sure enough, the boss shows up. A Kunlun demon ox emerges, a level 58 boss with just over 300,000 in total stats. Lin can't help but feel a little speechless. Looks like the early stage dungeon mobs really are weak, especially when compared to the monsters from the Eternal Trial Grounds. The gap is honestly wild. The fight starts immediately. The boss opens with a buff skill, lets out a furious roar, and charges at Lin while swinging its massive axe. Lin doesn't even move. He casually uses Bone Spike, and the very next second, the spike pierces straight through the boss's body. Just like that, it's over. The system tells him he's killed the Kunlun Demon Ox, granting 5.8 million experience points and 2 pieces of equipment. Lin collects the loot and tosses it into his storage space, then looks back at the hourglass. By his estimate, clearing the mobs took about half an hour, and the boss was an instant delete. This timing should easily land him an excellent rating. Soon after, the hourglass disappears, and not far away, a soft green glow lights up beneath the snow. Lin, curious, walks over and hears the system announce that he has successfully cleared the first stage of the Kunlun Palace solo, earning an excellent evaluation. The glowing object buried in the snow turns out to be a blade of grass. The detection spell tells him it's Kunlun Snowgrass, an extra dungeon reward. The item description is read below level 80. It boosts 1 level. Below 70, boosts 2 levels. And below 60, it jumps you up 3 levels. This was a shocker, and even our boy is caught off guard. He's never heard of anything this busted existing, and none of the books mention it either, and he wonders if he's the first person ever to obtain this item. Lin picks up the snowgrass, notes it mentally, and decides to stash it for now, and he'll just ask Antares about it later. Next up, it's time to challenge the second stage. That said, Lin hopes the next part actually brings some heat. As he leaves the dungeon, the scene quietly shifts to a snow-covered mountain behind him, where something is clearly watching his every move. Lin reappears at the dungeon entrance and glances around, noting an odd feeling in the air. It's subtle, but persistent, like someone has locked onto him. Before long, the same captain from earlier spots Lin coming out again. For a split second, he thinks he's tripping, but in the very next moment, a vortex opens behind our boy and drags him straight inside. This bizarre scene is witnessed by everyone stationed nearby, and it's obvious this isn't the normal way of entering a dungeon. Lin, meanwhile, stays calm and asks in a low voice whether they've finally decided to make a move. Icy wind and snow slam into his body non-stop, forcing him to shield his eyes as he tries to figure out where he is. Even though the surroundings look similar to the dungeon, he quickly realizes this definitely isn't it. The air is saturated with pure elemental power. By Antares' standards, this place is almost certainly a god's elemental world. Lin tells the one playing hide-and-seek to stop the theatrics and show himself already. Moments later, the surrounding elements begin to condense, and from within steps out the Kunlun Snow God, level 90. Lin notes it immediately, so this is the guy. That hostile gaze from earlier was definitely him. The Snow God introduces himself as the Kunlun Snow God. Lin also gives his name, but meanwhile, before confirming the other side's intentions, he takes the safer route. He states that he's a 3-star divine general of the Empire, then asks why he was forcibly dragged here, and then attacked with wind and snow, for which he demanded an explanation. Unfortunately, the Snow God couldn't care less about Lin's status. He simply extends a hand and demands that Lin hand over the divine seat. After that, he'll be allowed to leave. At this point, the intention is obvious. The real question is how he even found out about the divine seat in the first place. And if Lin refuses, what exactly does this guy think he can do? The Snow God's voice drops several degrees, and the temperature around them plummets in response. The outstretched hand slowly curls into a fist as he declares that if Lin won't comply, he'll just kill him here. Lin almost laughs, hearing the dude running his mouth like that, so he has zero intention of holding back. Honestly, he doesn't believe a newborn god can do anything to him anyway. So our boy tells him straight up he has no idea what a 3-star divine general actually means. Lin summons his scythe and rises into the air, then immediately calls out all of his skeletons. The Snow God raises a single finger and points it toward the skeletal army. A wave of freezing wind surges forward as he casts Wind Snow Freeze. Tiny layers of frost begin forming on the skellies, and within seconds, they're frozen solid. It was a massive AoE skill, and most of the skellies were hit. However, Lin isn't affected thanks to status immunity, but he notes that this guy is definitely not as simple as he first thought. The Snow God asks if Lin sees it now, remarking that within his world, he is invincible. Lin just smiles and says that isn't necessarily true. Right after that, he uses Soul Summon and calls out Big Boy. At the same time, he pulls out a drop of the Poison God's essence blood. The moment the Snow God senses the energy within it, disbelief flashes across his face. He never expected Lin to be holding something like this in reserve. Big Boy charges forward and absorbs the essence blood right in front of the Snow God. He freezes for a moment, clearly not understanding what he's seeing. But in the very next second, Big Boy's skill activates, and thick toxic mist erupts outward, instantly swallowing the snow god whole. A pained cry rings out as he finally realizes this poison is way too powerful for him and his body is actually being corroded. And just like that, panic sets in. He forces himself to dispel the toxic mist, gritting his teeth as rage boils over. He declares that he's going to grind Lin to dust. At the same time, down at the foot of the mountain, the snow god's elemental world begins collapsing. Cracks spread through the sky, and the escaping poison mist leaks outward, finally drawing the attention of other professionals nearby. However, what appears first isn't the god, but our boy's undead legion. Moments later, the snow god's furious roar echoes across the mountains. Someone recognizes the skeletons immediately and says that it's Divine General Lin's undead army. Meanwhile, the terrifying pressure rolling in from the distance makes everyone realize he is fighting something insanely strong. Right then, Lin turns his attention outward and issues a command to the surrounding professionals. He states, in the name of a divine general, that everyone is to retreat 10 kilometers from the mountain immediately, and anyone who stays does so at their own risk. The Empire's professionals react instantly, saluting and complying without hesitation, while everyone else began pulling back as well. No one wants to get caught anywhere near this mess. The fight, however, is far from over. The snow god charges straight at Lin, clearly not in a great mood. Lin notes that it's time to stop playing around. He activates mighty soldiers and overcharge back-to-back. You know what they always say, if one explosion isn't enough, then he'll just stack more. The fight drags on, and each collision between the two sends violent shockwaves through the mountain range. The ground trembles again and again. Someone finally realizes what they're witnessing and blurts out that he's fighting a god over there. The idea that Divine General Lin is actually throwing hands with a god leaves everyone straight up stunned. Meanwhile, our boy follows up with skeletal prison. Massive bone shackles snap into place, tightly locking down the snow god. The massive level gap means the restraint won't last long, but that's all our boy ever needed. Just enough time for the big boy get into position. Under the snow god's panicked gaze, the big boy activates his skill once more. This time, practically point blank right in the guy's face. Explosions keep rumbling in the distance, and even from this far away, the impact is impossible to miss. Only now does everyone truly understand why Lin had ordered them to stay away. Otherwise, they would have been swallowed by that terrifying poison mist as well. By now, more people have started to realize just how strong Lin really is, though there's still some doubt about whether it's enough to actually finish the enemy. When we return to the fight, the Kunlun snow god looks utterly pathetic. Half of his body has already been corroded away, with his face frozen in disbelief. By this point, he seems to have accepted his fate, and asks whether this is the true strength of a 3-star human divine general. Lin confirms it and tells him that reaching this rank means someone like him has already killed 3 divine-level beings, though that part is clearly exaggerated. But the snow god doesn't know that, of course. He mutters to himself, thinking over what Lin says, then suddenly bursts out laughing. He remarks that it's no wonder Lin never feared him, and even mentions that he's about to become the 4th god to fall by Lin's hand. Still, as a god, he insists that even in death, he'll die with dignity. As he's saying all this, his body begins to fade. A crystal forms in the air, and inside it rests a single blade of grass. That's when Lin realizes the snow god is about to self-destruct his divine core. He immediately turns around and tells everyone to back off, insisting the farther the better. Light starts blooming in the distance, the ground begins to shake, and many people still haven't figured out what's going on. Just then, the divine core detonates. A horrifying surge of energy erupts outward, causing an avalanche with mountains collapsing and the earth splitting apart. Because Lin was in the center of it all, even though he reacts immediately, all he can do is retreat as fast as possible. After the explosion, the rest of the divine core shatters into fragments, while our boy is violently blasted into a distant snow mountain. His condition isn't great, but at least he survives. The rest of his skellies, however, are almost completely wiped out. Thankfully, the self-destruction only comes in a single wave. He climbs out of the snowy mountain and looks back at where he just fought, now completely flattened. Lin can't help but feel a bit regretful. The dude chose to self-destruct, which means no experience gained and no military merits either. In the distance, the other professionals cautiously dug themselves out. Many of them are half buried in snow and look pretty miserable, but there are no casualties. One person remarks that the scene was utterly terrifying, while more people feel relieved that they listened to Lin earlier. Otherwise, they'd definitely be dead by now. Thinking about the grass inside his divine core, Lin notes that maybe the snow god's true form was the Kunlun snowgrass itself. And after he solo cleared the dungeon and took it through the storage space, the guy sensed he had the divine seat inside of him. While contemplating all this, what our boy doesn't notice is that at this very moment, a tiny purple insect appears on the snowgrass. While he's not paying attention, it quietly slips into his neck. Some while later, Lin cleans himself up and returns to the courtyard, then brings up everything that happened along the way. White Divine notes that he has never heard of such an existence within the Kunlun Mountains before. In the meantime, Lin is completely drenched in sweat. He says it was likely a newborn god and guesses that it's connected to the snowgrass he obtained earlier. As he says this, he presses a hand to his forehead, his voice clearly weaker than usual. White Divine starts thinking things through and, in the process, doesn't really notice Lin's condition. He simply tells Lin to take out the grass and let Old Mung have a look, noting that Old Mung knows far more about these matters. Lin is just about to pull it out of his storage space when a sudden wave of dizziness hits him. He grabs onto the table to keep himself upright, takes a few deep breaths, then collapses backwards. White Divine jumps up in shock, quickly catching him and checking his body. He anxiously asks what's going on, clearly rattled by the sudden turn. In the next scene, Lin is already lying on a bed. Harmony sits by his side, wiping the sweat from his face and feeding him some potion. White Divine and Meng Anwen stand nearby, both anxiously asking Harmony's grandfather how Lin is doing. The old man says he can't find anything visibly wrong with Lin's body, but his life force is steadily draining away. He reflects that inside Lin, there seems to be something like a bottomless pit, constantly devouring his life force. At that speed, it would be enough to drain any ordinary professional dry in an instant. Yet whatever it is, it clearly isn't doing that. He believed this doesn't look like poisoning at all, and it feels more like something is wrong with our boy's soul. Hearing this, Meng Anwen immediately thinks of the Soul Eater. So he summons the Divine Tower, and its power peels Lin's soul outward. A tiny purple insect emerges from within, stunning everyone present. In the next second, the insect darts straight toward them. Meng Anwen reacts instantly, controlling the tower again as a formation appears and locks the creature in place. After that's all done, Lin finally opens his eyes on the bed. Harmony looks relieved and says he's finally awake, noting how worried she's been. Lin weakly sits up, rubbing his head, and asks what happened. Harmony explains that Grandpa says he seems to have been parasitized by something called a Soul Eater. Just hearing the name makes Lin feel uneasy. Harmony points toward the trapped insect, which keeps baring its mouth at them, especially witnessing the sharp spikes inside twitching non-stop. Harmony gets startled and hurriedly steps back, while Lin has no idea when the thing even entered his body. Meng Anwen explains that these things have no physical bodies and exist purely in soul form, making them extremely hard to detect with the naked eye. He notes that he never expected to see them again after 1,000 years. Lin doesn't hesitate and releases a burst of soul flame. The insect struggles briefly, then is wiped out in the next instant. Lin comments that it was a very weak soul after all. White Divine reflects that the Kunlun Divine Palace area will have to be completely sealed off. At the same time, he's more worried about how many of these creatures might have escaped. He further adds that ordinary people have no way to resist this kind of parasitism, and if things go wrong, this could easily become a catastrophe capable of wiping out the human race. Harmony asks what would happen if someone were to get parasitized by that thing. Her grandfather answers her and explains that there are usually 3 possible outcomes. The first is becoming half dead, where the creature continuously feeds on the host, draining both life force and soul power, basically eating anything it can get. The second outcome is that if it finds a better host, it will simply suck the current one dry and move on. The third, and worst case, is when it decides the host's body is good enough, eats the soul entirely, and replaces it. Harmony covers her mouth, clearly terrified, and remarks that it sounds horrifying. Meng Anwen then says that before the empire was even founded, there was once a Soul Eater disaster. That incident nearly wiped out the entire human race, and unfortunately, most of the records on how to deal with it were lost. He reflects that perhaps only the royal family might still have those materials preserved, which is why he believes a trip to the imperial palace is necessary. Without any hesitation, he immediately activates the Divine Tower and teleports everyone straight to the palace. As they arrive above it, Meng Anwen's voice carries outward, asking to see the emperor. A figure quickly rises into the air. Upon seeing who had arrived, he respectfully greeted them and asked what urgent matter brought them here so suddenly. Meng Anwen explains the situation and the old emperor looks surprised and admits that he's never heard of the Soul Eater before. White Divine then explains that he knows the royal family has their own archives, and that this visit is specifically to search for information related to those creatures. The emperor hesitates slightly, but when he notices Lin standing behind them, he realizes this may truly involve the survival of the human race. He explains that Elder Li controls the imperial archives and suggests they ask him instead. The scene shifts into the archive, where Grandpa Li has already located the records they are looking for. A while later, Meng Anwen sits down and finishes reading all the books. Li remarks that if it really is a Soul Eater they are dealing with, then this would be a massive disaster. Meng Anwen, however, shakes his head and says that's not necessarily the case. He notes that it might actually be a huge opportunity. He explains that ancient records describe that during the era of chaos, before humanity was unified, a Soul Eater disaster once broke out. Back then, humanity paid an enormous price just to barely secure victory, and almost all divine-level professionals perished. Soon after, demons and dragons descended. At a time when humanity was severely weakened, a group of extraordinary prodigies suddenly emerged. Within just a few decades, they rose to a divine level, held the line for humanity, and bought precious breathing room, allowing the human race to survive and develop into what it is today. Closing the final book, Meng Anwen says that the birth of those prodigies was directly related to the Soul Eaters, because the creatures devour souls and all forms of flesh-based power, but if they are destroyed before fully mature, their power would instead merge into the person's soul. Since a stronger soul leads to higher attributes, the chance of professional evolution increases dramatically. That's exactly how those ancient human prodigies came to be. Lin thinks of a key problem and asks how one is supposed to eliminate a Soul Eater at such an early stage, especially since even he failed to notice it in time. To our boy's surprise, Meng Anwen doesn't explain. Instead, he tells Lin that this isn't something he needs to worry about right now, and that these matters should be left to the old folks. The Emperor, meanwhile, also realizes how serious the situation is, noting that whatever plan they make will be on a massive scale. Grandpa Li agrees, but adds that once everything is in place, their empire is bound to produce a wave of outstanding talents. However, White Divine remarks that if they want to make this work, they would need the royal family's full support. Understanding the gravity of the situation, the royal family naturally agrees to give their full support. After all, this is the kind of achievement that could be recorded in history. Harmony's grandfather, who had been silent the whole time, finally smiles and says they should first send people to stabilize the situation and stop the spread of the Soul Eaters, especially from leaking into other nations. After all, an opportunity of this magnitude should remain firmly in their own hands. The group of old men exchange smiles, clearly realizing they're all thinking along the same lines. After that, Meng Anwen asks about Lin's next plan. Lin says he wants to go ask someone for advice. Meng Anwen immediately understands that Lin is referring to Antares, and he agrees with the idea. With Antares involved, the odds of success would rise significantly. Since that's the case, Meng Anwen decides to send Lin there himself. The Divine Tower activates, and in the next second, Lin vanishes. Hearing the conversation, the Emperor turns to Grandpa Li, clearly surprised that Lin is able to talk to Antares. This further fuels Grandpa Li's determination, so he once again emphasizes that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the Empire and insists that everything must be handled properly. The Emperor straightened up and responded seriously, saying that he understood. Back at the Eternal Trial Grounds, Lin's sudden appearance immediately draws the attention of the ancient Phoenix. The little guy still looks extremely hostile, but Lin notes that he isn't here for her and explains that he's here to see Antares. Antares slowly opens his eyes, waking up with some curiosity, and asks why Lin has come back again. Lin says that something serious has happened to the human race, and that he wants to seek his opinion. Very quickly, Lin lays out everything about the Soul Eater. After listening, Antares' expression changes drastically. He asks what kind of insane luck Lin has to actually run into these creatures. Lin feels speechless, noting that he almost got his body taken over by a disgusting bug and definitely doesn't consider that good luck. Antares doesn't respond to that. Instead, he asks Lin a different question, one about whether 100 level 85 top-level professionals are stronger than a single level 90 divine-level professional. Lin answers without hesitation, saying that a divine-level professional is obviously stronger since there's absolutely no comparison. Antares says Lin is absolutely right. He remarks that for any race, the emergence of a single great power matters far more than just sheer numbers. As a result, the higher the level, the greater the gap, and he further notes that even if every human became divine level, it still wouldn't compare to the birth of a single supreme divine. And the Soul Eater, he says, represents exactly such an opportunity, assuming Lin can actually grasp it. Hearing this, Lin is completely dumbfounded. He can't help but wonder if Antares is implying that these creatures could be used to create a supreme divine. It's finally revealed to our boy that there's a way bigger play on the table. As long as a divine-level formation master forges a soul fusion formation, and Lin serves as the center, every Soul Eater killed inside the formation would have all of its energy funneled straight into Lin alone, turning into pure nourishment. Antares note that this kind of amplification on the soul is something even primordial runes can't pull off. Pointing things out clearly, he remarks that, in short, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Furthermore, he doesn't forget to tell Lin that he's only sharing all this out of goodwill, purely because he respected our boy. While digesting everything, Lin reflects that if Antares is willing to spill this much, the guy almost certainly knows how to set up the soul fusion formation himself. Whether Antares actually plans to teach it or not doesn't even matter at this point. The problem, as Antares noted, was that he needed a divine-level formation master. That's when our boy casually comments that one of his teachers happens to be one of them. Meanwhile, Antares tilts his head back, scratches his chin, and asks himself why something this valuable should be handed over for free. After all, this is a path that could lead straight to becoming a supreme divine. He reasons that Lin should obviously pay a price, such as agreeing to complete 3 favors for him. Now our boy finally gets it. Antares was playing this angle all along. That being said, the soul fusion formation itself is probably legit. Antares then adds that there's actually another way to deal with Soul Eaters, which is by using a soul fusion potion. Once consumed, it exterminates the creature lodged in the soul, and its power instead turns into a massive boost for the host. He even asks whether Lin wants to think about it, mentioning that he could also pass along the potion's formula. Anyway, Lin just shrugs it off and tells him to forget it. Antares is instantly stunned, staring at Lin in disbelief and asking what that's supposed to mean. Lin scratches his head and explains that he simply can't afford it, so there's no choice but to give up. As for the potion, he notes that ancient records already mention it, meaning they can probably brew it themselves. Either way, Lin still feels it's only right to thank him for explaining everything. After bowing in gratitude, Lin turns and prepares to leave, but Antares can't sit still anymore. He hurriedly stops him and asks whether he really doesn't want to become a supreme divine. The answer is obvious. Of course Lin wants to, but he just comments that the price is too high and way beyond what he can pay. Antares refuses to give up, reasoning that 3 favors shouldn't be that hard. But our boy calmly counters that one wrong move could cost him his life, and if he's dead, the thought of becoming a supreme divine is practically useless. Antares then raises 2 fingers and proposes cutting it down to 2 deals. Lin still shakes his head, remarking that the tasks are too dangerous, and reminds him that he nearly died last time in Thunder Burial Canyon. At this point, Antares starts to panic. He urges Lin to reconsider, saying that 2 is already his absolute bottom line. That's when Lin realizes Antares is hooked. He reflects that the guy is clearly nervous, which means he can still bargain a little. By this point, Lin neither agrees nor refuses, staying completely silent. In the end, Antares is the one who cracks. This time, he lowers it to a single favor, looking visibly irritated. He doesn't even give Lin room to refuse, directly stating that after Lin completes his 3rd-class transfer, he must head to the Dragon King Palace and retrieve another dragon pearl for him. In exchange, Antares will hand over both the potion formula and the soul fusion formation method. Our boy finally turns around, a faint smirk forming as he lifts his hand and tells him it's a deal. With that all out of the way, Lin actually leaves this time, leaving Antares behind, stomping in place, and fuming to himself. He keeps thinking about how ridiculously sharp that kid is, replaying the whole exchange in his head, and wondering exactly where he gave himself away. Even so, Antares doesn't feel like he ended up losing out. After all, that formation itself was always meant to end up in Lin's hands anyway, even if Lin didn't agree. Though he admitted that he just never expected the Soul Eater to show up this soon. Looking up at the sky, he remarks that this world is finally about to give birth to a supreme divine, and that his own freedom is drawing closer as well. Meanwhile, Lin returns to the small courtyard. Mung Anwen asks if everything went smoothly, and Lin tells him that it did before casually placing 2 items on the table. One is the potion's brewing method, and the other is the setup for the soul fusion formation. The moment the formation is mentioned, Meng Anwen's interest is instantly piqued. He pulls the scroll from its container, and strange characters along with surging energy spill out. One look is enough to tell him this formation is anything but ordinary. He studies it carefully, and when Lin asks whether it can be set up, Meng Anwen notes that he's confident, but he'll need time to properly look into it a bit more. Furthermore, if he is reading this right, he believes the formation seems to be designed for only one person. That's when our boy finally spills the beans and reveals that, according to Antares, this formation could lay the foundation for him to become a supreme divine. At the mention of that, old Meng's expression changes completely. He tells Lin to carefully recount every detail of their conversation. After listening for a while, Meng Anwen takes a deep breath and comments that it's absolutely true that no matter how many divine-level professionals there are, they still can't compare to a single supreme divine. This further convinces him that Antares desperately wants Lin to reach that level. He even reasons that perhaps even if Lin had refused to do what he asked, Antares would have forced the formation on him sooner or later. Lin freezes for a moment, then mutters that if he'd known that, he wouldn't have agreed to the trade so easily. Meng Anwen chuckles at that, telling him he's already clever enough, and that Antares is probably sulking somewhere right now. Anyway, since this formation benefits Lin so much, Meng Anwen declares that he'll go all out to help him. As for the potion, he notes that it'll have to be handed over to Old Shu. Reflecting on the implications, Meng Anwen adds that once this potion becomes available, the Empire might enter an era of prodigies. Even so, for professionals, character matters more than talent, so the people allowed to use it must be chosen carefully. He then asks Lin what he plans to do next. Lin says he wants to find a place to keep grinding levels. Meng Anwen thinks that's a solid plan, and mentions that White Divine is currently over at the Kunlun Palace hunting soul eaters, adding that Lin's heading there would be safe. He tells Lin not to worry about matters on this end, since they'll coordinate everything with the royal family. In the next scene, the Imperial Palace is packed with high-ranking officials. The Emperor solemnly emphasizes that this concerns the future of the human race and tells everyone to follow the plan without deviation. While preparations against the Soul Eater move forward in secret at full speed, news also reaches the abyss. In front of the Demon Emperor, we see Succubus kneeling and reporting that it is true that Meng Anwen appears to be leading some kind of operation on the human side. The pressure released by the Demon Emperor is so overwhelming that she can barely lift her head. She hurriedly explains that recent intelligence suggests Meng Anwen is setting up an enormous formation, one that nearly covers the entire empire. However, since most of her demon worshippers were almost completely wiped out, they've been unable to gather more details. The Demon Emperor comments that Meng Anwen is the only dual divine-level alchemist and formation master among humans, holds an extremely high status, and even controls nearly half of the military's power. Someone like that scheming in secret can only mean they are planning something huge. After a brief moment of thought, he hands the succubus a crystal sphere and tells her to get as close to the formation as possible and activate it. This task, he stresses, must be carried out personally. She freezes for a split second, then quickly answers that she understands. When the palace is finally empty, the Demon Emperor is left alone, muttering to himself and questioning what on earth the human race and what exactly Emperor Dai is really plotting this time. Look like the story's lining up yet another new character. Anyways, the scene then cuts to the Succubus Palace. Turns out, she wasn't the one who reported on what happened on the human side to the Demon Emperor, and was suddenly called over, and now she's confused about how the Emperor found out in the first place. The thought that someone might have snitched to him behind her back seriously irritates her, and she notes that if she ever figures out who leaked the information, that person is definitely not walking away intact. That being said, the Demon Emperor has already ordered her to personally head to the human territory. Of course, human divine levels aren't just decoration, and she has zero interest in dying over there, so after a bit of consideration, she decides to send her clone instead. Meanwhile, someone arrives at her palace. It turns out to be the Dark Sky Demon Lord. She asks what he's doing here, and he explains that he's trying to gather some information about Lin. She smiles and casually agrees to help, mentioning that she just received orders from the Demon Emperor to make a trip to the human side anyway. Internally, though, she reflects that a perfect scapegoat just walked through the door. Hearing this, Dark Sky pulls out a top-grade abyssal stone as payment for letting his clone tag along. She takes it without hesitation and looks more than satisfied. The next scene shifts to a lonely island. A group of people is gathered around a formation, chanting non-stop. A closer look makes it obvious. They're members of the demon worshippers. They're using the formation to summon demon lords, sacrificing their own bodies and lives to force open a teleportation portal. Moments later, both the succubus queen and the dark sky step out. Almost instantly, dark sky locks onto his target and succubus waves at him, even reminding him to be careful. He doesn't waste any words, simply expressing his thanks before charging off. In her eyes, though, this is nothing more than a suicide run. But again, that's not her problem. The very next moment, she turns and flies off in the opposite direction. Not long after, she arrives in a city. According to the intel, Meng Anwen passed through here a few days ago before leaving. She reasons that this place should be the safest option. From far away, she can already see the massive formation, along with numerous guards stationed around it. She senses the energy within, and notes that the array itself is so profound that she can't even guess what Meng Anwen is trying to accomplish. She quietly slips into the city. There's no time to overthink things now. She takes out the crystal sphere, and her only task is to complete the Demon Emperor's order. Once activated, the crystal sphere dissolves into energy and slowly seeps into the formation. Just like that, the mission is done. But she felt it was almost too easy. Then suddenly, streaks of red light ignite around her. She immediately senses danger and curses under her breath, realizing things were never going to be that simple. But before she could even do anything, her body was completely restrained. When she looked up, she saw the divine tower had already materialized above her head. Everything clicks at once. Meng Anwen has been waiting here all along. As it turns out, old Meng had already predicted that the abyss wouldn't stay quiet, so he installed warning systems into every major formation. He only expected to catch a few small fry, but instead, a demon lord took the bait. She quickly explains that she was just curious and came to see why they were making such a huge fuss. Meng Anwen calmly tells her that now that she's seen enough, she can die. He activates the divine tower, and an overwhelming force crashes down onto her clone. She notes that he must be insane, asking whether he's not afraid she'll self-destruct this clone and drag the entire city down with her. Meng Anwen simply remarks that's not gonna happen. The next second, her body is forcibly dragged into the sky. A beam of red light shoots straight at her, and her form begins to corrode instantly. She struggles desperately to break free, but a clone is still just a clone. Just as she's convinced her clone is about to perish here, the black mist that had previously merged into the formation suddenly gathers and wraps around her clone. Meng Anwen's expression changes on the spot as a massive silhouette slowly emerges before him. The Demon Emperor casually lifts a finger, and in the next instant, a terrifying wave of energy shoots straight toward Meng Anwen. He reacts immediately and retreats, but in doing so, he temporarily loses control of the divine tower. With the restraint gone, Succubus is also freed. Meanwhile, the Demon Emperor signals for her to get out of here. Meng Anwen clearly isn't planning to let her walk away that easily. He goes all in and launches a full-power strike, but before it can land, the Demon Emperor's projection points its finger again. This time, Meng Anwen is caught completely off guard. He panics for a split second and throws the divine tower in front of him as a shield. But the tower is blasted away once more, and Meng Anwen himself is sent flying with it. This hit is far worse than before, forcing the old man to spit out a massive mouthful of blood. As he watches the succubus and the projection fade into the distance, he curses inwardly, realizing they're about to escape. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Succubus finally lets out a breath of relief, thinking she's made it out alive. But before that thought can settle, a sword energy suddenly tears through the sky from afar. She instinctively turns her head back, only to be split cleanly in half the very next second. No scream, no struggle, just instant death. The Demon Emperor's projection snaps around, his eyes narrowing. That sword energy immediately triggers a memory, and he can hardly believe what he's sensing and quickly realizes Zhang Yi has been resurrected. Meng Anwen was equally shocked. He reflects that after learning about Zhang Yi's deal with Antares from Lin, he already suspected revival was possible sooner or later, but didn't expect it to happen this fast. He clenches his fists, forcefully suppressing his excitement, and looks up toward the sword hovering in the sky. One glance is enough to confirm it, the overwhelming aura giving it away instantly. This is the demon-slaying sword, the very blade Zhang Yi once wielded. The sword began speaking openly, acknowledging the Demon Emperor and noting that after so many years, the reunion is long overdue. It further remarks that once he fully returns, he'll personally pay a visit to the abyss. With all that said and done, the sword swings down. In a single flash, the sword energy shatters the Demon Emperor's projection into fragments. The only thing left behind is the Demon Emperor's furious roar echoing Zhang Yi's name before the image completely dissipates. Meng Anwen rushes over moments later, barely containing himself. He eagerly asks when Jiang Yi will return. The response comes swiftly, noting that it won't be long now. He also takes a moment to comment that Meng Anwen has done well, adding that with someone like old Meng guarding the human race, he can rest assured. After that, the demon-slaying sword vanishes without a trace. Old Meng quietly noted that both the Demon Emperor and Jiang Yi are far stronger than he, but this only fueled his determination to work even harder from here on out. Sometime later, the scene shifts elsewhere. Lin emerges from a dungeon, looking noticeably refreshed. With the help of the Kunlun snowgrass and a cooldown amulet, he's been grinding non-stop. As a result, his level has finally climbed to 59. While he's pondering what he should do next, and what kind of new abilities he'll unlock at level 60, the sky above suddenly darkens. A massive shadow with an unmistakably sinister presence crashes down from above, announcing that it has finally found him. Lin is still thinking about future skills and possible changes when the atmosphere suddenly collapses. Something plummets toward him at terrifying speed. His expression changed instantly and he was blasted away. He reacts almost immediately, already identifying the attacker. That overwhelming abyssal aura leaves no room for doubt. Without question, this is a demon lord. He quickly reinforces his skeletal armor and forces himself steady, but by the time he regains balance, the damage is already done. All around the camp, bodies are scattered everywhere. Many have already gone completely still, while many were severely injured. Darkness blankets the entire area, and hovering above it all is Dark Sky Demon Lord, gripping his long spear as he stares straight down at Lin. Our guy immediately recognizes who it is, but the moment his eyes sweep over the corpses, his anger detonates. Killing intent spills out almost instantly. That said, he could sense this isn't the real deal, rather just a clone. His teacher is still exploring a secret realm and won't be back anytime soon. And with no backup for at least a while, he'd have to fight all by himself. Dark Sky roars as he attacks, his power transforming into black lightning that crashes toward our boy. He tries influence our boy and declares that every death here happened because of him. But our guy doesn't hesitate for even a second. He stacks 2 primordial skills and immediately counters with soul flames. Black mist erupts around Dark Sky's body. He clearly thinks he's prepared, assuming he can easily block the soul flame. He even sneers internally, questioning whether Lin really believes the same trick would work again. However, what he doesn't expect is that soul flames enhanced by mighty soldiers and overcharged are on a completely different level, and a mere clone has no chance of stopping them. And just like that, flames land cleanly on his head. Dark Sky lets out a scream, completely shaken, asking how this is even possible. At the same time, he can clearly feel Lin's soul attacks are far stronger than last time. Lin doesn't bother responding and follows up instantly with Skeletal Prison. The Demon Lord spins his spear wildly, metallic clashes ringing out as massive bone shackles snap one after another. Even so, the little skeletons have already surrounded him from every angle. However, to the Demon Lord, this is almost laughable. A bunch of level 60 summons are nothing more than fodder to him. He activates another skill, hurling his spear straight into the sky. The next second, a massive gateway opens above, and countless spears rain down like a storm. With the huge AoE and the overwhelming level gap, many skeletons are wiped out on the spot, not even giving damage transfer and lifelink a chance to proc. Lin notes immediately that this version of Dark Sky is so much stronger than the one he encountered in Eternal Trial Grounds, meaning he has to be extremely careful from here on out. With most of the skellies cleared away, Dark Sky prepares to go all out. He grips his spear tightly and comes crashing down toward Lin with full force. Lin meets the strike head-on with his own scythe. Once again, the Demon Lord is stunned, and he can't believe a summoner-type profession can block his attack in melee. While Dark Sky is trying to figure out what is going on, Lin is already planning his next move. At nearly point-blank range, he casts Skeletal Prison again. Massive bone shackles erupt and coil tightly around Dark Sky's enormous body. The Demon Lord struggles violently, but our guy doesn't give him even a sliver of opportunity. Meanwhile, Big Boy is already in position. Infused with the Poison God's essence blood, the setup is complete. The Demon Lord's eyes widen in horror as he recognizes it's that goddamn poison again. Big Boy wastes no time and absorbs the essence blood and launches it straight into Dark Sky's face. Bound tightly by the skeletal prison and unable to move, Dark Sky can only watch as our guy personally grips the shackles standing on his shoulders, refusing to let go. The Demon Lord calls our boy insane, questioning whether he plans to die together with him. Lin calmly comments that if he wants to kill a Demon Lord for now, this is the only way, and he knew for a fact that poison is especially effective against Dark Sky. The attack lands. Thick, toxic fog explodes outward, completely swallowing both of them as the battlefield disappears into a toxic haze. In the next scene, we see Dark Sky's body begin to melt away, and the shock hits him instantly when he realizes Lin is standing there completely unharmed by the toxic mist. He completely loses it, screaming that this shouldn't be possible. Lin, however, just smiles it off and comments that nothing is impossible, telling Dark Sky to properly enjoy the grand feast he personally prepared for him. A violent explosion tears through the sky, and with it, Dark Sky's body finally disperses for good. Immediately after, golden light erupts from Lin's body as the system notification kicks in, noting that a Demon Lord clone has been killed, increasing his level by 1, and earning enough military merit for another star. Just like that, Lin's rank officially reaches 4-star Divine General. Cold wind howls through the battlefield as Lin looks down at the camp below, now completely wrecked, along with the lifeless bodies of the professionals scattered everywhere. Guilt washes over him first, knowing Dark Sky came because of him, and these people suffered as collateral damage. But soon after, a fury he's never felt before rises up, killing intent flickering in his eyes as he remarks that the abyss is truly damned. A voice suddenly calls out his name, snapping him out of it. It was White Divine, and behind him stands a woman, and her name is Ju Qingliu, a divine-level healer. White Divine asks how Lin is holding up, explaining that the moment they received Lin's message, they rushed back from the secret realm. Meanwhile, Ju freezes when she sees the aftermath, then immediately moves into action. A moon-shaped staff appears in her hand, and a massive beam of pure white holy light descends from the sky, overflowing with life energy as it blankets the entire mountain range. A professional clinging to a wall, who had already lost an arm, suddenly watches in disbelief as his limb regenerates. And just like that, the true power of divine-level healing begins to show itself. Whether lightly injured or critically wounded, everyone starts recovering at a visible rate. White Divine comes to Lin's side and tells him to leave the healing to her. He then asks what exactly happened. Lin explains that the Abyss sent Dark Sky's clone to assassinate him, and the fight ended up dragging the camp into it. White Divine pats Lin on the shoulder and reassures him not to overthink it. He notes that humans and demons have been fighting for thousands of years, and situations like this are unavoidable. All they can do now is kill more demons and make them pay in blood. Lin looks once more at those who never woke up. Slowly and firmly, he remarks that if he ever gets the chance, he'll personally head back to the Abyss again and take revenge. The scene shifts back to the Abyss. Inside the Demon Emperor's palace, although his projection was destroyed, he had already obtained information about the Soul Eaters. He also realizes that the human race is clearly trying to nurture a supreme divine. He comments that it's nothing but wishful thinking. That said, Jiang Yi's revival also seems inevitable, meaning humanity may soon gain another half-step supreme divine. What really catches his attention, however, is that all of this appears to be connected to the sudden rise of that human boy named Lin. With that realization, he concludes that the time has come, and Lin can no longer be allowed to live. The scene cuts back once again to Kunlun Mountain, deep inside the Soul Eater secret realm. Amid the biting cold winds, a lone professional presses forward, completely unaware that a tiny creature has already locked onto him. The insect slips in through his neck, silently invading his body and beginning to gnaw at his soul. However, he isn't the only one. Similar situations keep happening across the area, but every time someone is affected, healing spells immediately descend and stabilize them. From the mountain peak above, White Divine and the other two simply watch everything unfold without intervening. He then turns and expresses his thanks to the woman, noting that this time, they truly owe her. But she knew it was just what she had to do. She further explained that she had mobilized every outstanding healer her family had, and she would do everything she could to assist them. That said, she still doesn't quite understand why they are orchestrating all of this, asking what the real purpose is behind such an arrangement. Meng Anwen responded with a heavy tone, commenting that they are doing this to cultivate poison through poison, and perhaps more precisely, they are trying to breed soul eaters. White Divine starts breaking things down, explaining that this time they've mobilized 30,000 soldiers to help collect the Soul Eaters. Furthermore, when you factor in all the professionals who were infected during this period, he estimates the final number could hit hundreds of thousands, maybe even over 1 million. Hearing that, Ju can only hope this plan succeeds, because if it fails, they're not just losing a battle. They're going down in history as absolute sinners. Meanwhile, a gentle breeze passes by as Lin returns to his small courtyard. This time, though, none of his teachers are around. He pours himself a cup of tea and sits on the stone bench, and after just one sip, His mind settles down almost instantly. Anyway, once the calm kicks in, he pulls out the brilliant intermediate skill scrolls he's been hoarding in his storage space. He notes that he's already level 60, which means it's finally time to awaken something new. He uses one scroll, golden light wrapping around his body as the scroll vanishes. But here's the weird part. He didn't actually get a new skill. That wasn't supposed to happen since these scrolls are supposed to work 100% of the time. Even stranger, there's no failure notice either. The scroll clearly activates, so Lin starts wondering if the skill is just so powerful that a single scroll isn't enough to trigger it. With that thought, he immediately uses another scroll. After several more, the golden light grows far more intense, and if you look closely, a massive skull phantom actually forms behind him. Then the system finally responds, announcing a new skill, Summon Skeleton King. The ability apparently merges skeletons from his undead legion and fuses them into a much stronger Skeleton King, with the minimum requirement being 1,000 skeletons. This instantly catches Lin off guard in the best way possible. The skill fits him perfectly, because at level 60, his summon space already holds nearly 5,000 skeletons. He doesn't even dare imagine how strong a Skeleton King would be if he merged everything. Our boy can't wait to test it out, so he activates the skill and immediately, dark clouds roll in as thousands of skeletons pour out, blotting out the sky. Thunder crashes as they begin merging, and Lin watches from the side, full of anticipation. Meanwhile, the little skellies fuse together, forming a gigantic bone throne, and from it emerges a massive skeleton wearing a bone crown, seated like a true monarch. Lin immediately checks its stats and nearly loses it. With just 1,000 skeletons, the Skeleton King already has 500,000 in all 4 attributes, plus 3 skills: God-Slaying Strike, Elemental Rampage, and Limitless Defense. His eyes go wide as he remarks that just stat-wise, the big guy is already on par with a level 80 world boss, and that's with only a fraction of what he has in stock. Naturally, that only makes him more curious. He wants to see what happens if he merges the rest of it. So he does exactly that. The Skeleton King undergoes another transformation, growing even larger in size, and a massive great sword materializes in its hand. This time, the numbers go completely insane. After fusing 4,000 skellies, all 4 attributes jump to 1 million. Only now does our guy fully examine the skills. God-Slaying Strike deals physical damage at 10 times the user's strength, with a 1-minute cooldown. Elemental Rampage is an AoE skill that deals elemental damage based on spirit, also on a 1-minute cooldown. And then there's Limitless Defense, which grants 99% immunity to all damage, completely ignores all negative effects, lasts for a full minute, and only has a 10-minute cooldown. At this point, Lin finally understands one thing. This Skeleton King isn't just strong, it's straight up broken. Our guy is completely speechless. An absolutely absurd skill paired with equally absurd stats, not only reaching borderline divine level but also stacking the best skill for warrior, mage, and knight-type professions all into one package. Needless to say, it's straight up broken. Then he lets out a smile, noting that with the Skeleton King in his arsenal, he now has the confidence to solo any boss below the divine level. Furthermore, even if the Dark Sky Demon Lord were to show up again, Lin figures this time he might not even need to use the Poison God's essence blood to finish the job. Just as he's thinking that, the Skeleton King suddenly drops to one knee, driving its massive greatsword into the ground in a formal show of loyalty. Lin gives a slight nod in response and calmly sends it back into the summoning space. Moments later, the dark clouds disperse, sunlight pours back into the courtyard, and peace returns as if nothing happened. Lin looks up at the sky and decides it's finally time to challenge the next stage of the Kunlun Mountain. Anyway, before heading out, he glances around and notices that the courtyard has basically turned into a pile of ruins thanks to his skill testing. So yeah, fixing this mess comes first before his teacher sees all this. A short while later, the scene shifts to the mountainside of Kunlun. Just like at the base, the dungeon entrance here is surrounded by a camp, with plenty of professionals and full squads already stationed nearby. Without missing a beat, Lin walks straight in by himself. As expected, that instantly stuns everyone around. A few people freeze on the spot, while others quickly start putting the pieces together. Someone notes that it has to be Divine General Lin, since rumors have been flying that he's been grinding in this area recently. Another person adds that anyone crazy enough to enter this place alone could only be him anyway. Once inside the dungeon, it's the same old frozen hellscape. Not long after, Lin runs into the first wave of monsters. A level 66 Kunlun War Eagle is hovering overhead, while 2 more immediately rush him from the sides. Without hesitation, Lin raises a hand, summons his brand new partner, and tells the Skeleton King to wipe them out. The flames in the Skeleton King's eyes ignite, and in the very next second, it charges forward. It swings its weapon and triggers its first skill, God-slaying strike. The blade doesn't even fully connect. Just the passing arc alone turns the War Eagle into dust. 2 rapid follow-up slashes later, the remaining monsters are erased just as cleanly. Lin glances at the hourglass timer above and can't help but feel surprised himself, remarking that the Skeleton King is way too strong, straight-up one-shotting enemies of the same level. He continues deeper toward the core region, where a massive horde of monsters has already gathered. Honestly, this is exactly what he wanted. So once again, he orders the big skelly to deal with them. The Skeleton King opens its mouth, energy rapidly condensing into a glowing sphere. With a powerful blast forward, it unleashes its second skill, Elemental Rampage. A violent explosion shakes the entire dungeon, and Lin's system notifications start flooding in non-stop, kill messages scrolling like crazy. Watching this, Lin nods in satisfaction, commenting that the damage is pretty solid. As he approaches the massive crater left behind, a sudden violent gust slams into him. Lin immediately realizes the boss is coming. A level 75 Kunlun Lion King drops from the sky and instantly launches an attack. Sonic waves sharpen into blade-like pressure and surge toward our guy, but the Skeleton King casually blocks them all and steps right up to the boss. No matter how wildly the Lion King attacks, it can't deal any damage at all. This is the Skeleton King's third skill in action, Limitless Defense. The exchange drags on for about a minute, and just before the skill wears off, Lin decides it's time to wrap things up. With the greatsword raised high, one final strike comes down, and the boss is instantly slain. The system chimes in, awarding 78 million experience. After the boss fades away, Lin checks his personal stats. Nothing major has changed, except that most of his core skills have now reached level 60. He exits the dungeon feeling pretty satisfied, thinking this place will be a perfect grinding spot for now. Naturally, his reappearance draws plenty of attention from the surrounding professionals, but when they see him enter the dungeon again, some of them are still visibly stunned. A girl remarks that if she remembers correctly, Divine General Lin only went in a short while ago. Someone else quickly confirms it, saying it's only been half an hour. Their team leader reflects that even a full squad would need dozens of hours to clear this dungeon, yet Lin finished it in under 30 minutes. Beyond shock, what they feel most is awe. With someone this strong around, humanity's future suddenly looks a lot brighter. Anyway, the scene cuts to another part of the snowy mountains. Yan comes running over in a panic, saying something has gone wrong. White Divine and the others turn to him and ask what happened. Yan's expression turns serious as he reports that Emperor D has disappeared. That instantly stuns everyone. White Divine asks if he checked the Creator's Island, noting that the old man rarely ever leaves that place. Yan confirms he went there, but found nothing. Meng Anwen remains calm, analyzing that perhaps something completely outside their expectations must have occurred. At this point, the only thing they can do is try to contact Zhang Yi. Most importantly, he stresses that the news of the old man's disappearance must not spread under any circumstances. Looking into the distance, the group understands that if the old man really isn't around, then for the foreseeable future, they'll have to shoulder pressure from every direction on their own. Meanwhile, the scene cuts elsewhere. 2 figures streak across the sky at extreme speed. Mohan asks her teacher what they're doing heading to the eternal trial grounds in the first place. The man beside her, white-haired with a cold and rigid expression, calmly answers that they're here to meet a powerful existence. And this old man is none other than the very person everyone's been talking about. What White Divine calls the old man just happens to be humanity's strongest. A short while later, the two suddenly appear before Antares. His eyes open, and an overwhelming aura surges outward, so terrifying that the space itself seems to tense up. D is the first to greet him and simultaneously shields Mohan from the pressure, though she can still feel traces of it. That alone makes her even more curious about who this being truly is. Antares lets out a faint smile, noting that this stubborn old guy is somehow still alive. He remarks that D even resisted the repulsion energy of the upper level just to come here, which makes him ask, what exactly does he want? D responds that their deal isn't finished yet, so how could he dare die so easily? Hearing that, Antares immediately guesses that D must have found the dragon pearl. D reaches out and hands over a small box, stating that he's found it and wants to complete their deal. Antares agrees and tells him to name his condition. D then looks toward Mohan and makes his request clear. He hopes Antares can split off a strand of his power to protect his disciple, at least until she reaches half-step Supreme Divine, ensuring her safety during that time. D explains that he understands Antares cannot interfere directly in human affairs, but he believes this kind of protection shouldn't violate his principles. Mohan is completely stunned, yet at the same time everything suddenly clicks. She finally understands why her teacher brought her here. Antares falls silent for a moment, but in the end, he doesn't refuse. He says it can be done, but he also can't help noting his curiosity. He remarks that Mohan is surprisingly similar to that kid, and they even smell alike. Mohan gets caught off guard when that sudden question drops, but she quickly realizes Antares is actually referring to her little brother. She asks if he's seen him, and Antares responds with a "I knew it" kind of expression, remarking that no wonder she carries that kid's scent. He then snorts, insisting the brat is full of schemes and absolutely not a good thing to have around. Mohan has no idea how to respond to that, and meanwhile, she's quietly shocked that her little bro somehow knows a being like this. It only makes her more curious about what Lin actually did to leave such an impression. Anyway, Antares doesn't bother elaborating. Instead, he just swallows the Dragon Ball, including the box, then notes that D chose a pretty suspicious time to hand this over. In his words, the old man clearly doesn't have much time left. D admits his end is approaching and remarks that he has no choice but to gamble everything he has left, his expression firm despite the grim truth behind it. But Mohan doesn't share the same calmness. She immediately asks what he means, though D doesn't answer. Antares is the one who steps in, explaining that her teacher's upcoming journey is basically a death sentence, meaning there's a very real chance he won't return. Mohan freezes, covers her mouth, and tears spill instantly because she can't process what she's hearing. D simply entrusts her to Antares, hoping he will take good care of her, and shoots into the sky, disappearing before she can say another word. Antares watches him leave and just snorts again, not particularly sentimental. Mohan stands there with watery eyes, still stunned. Antares raises a finger, and a golden spark lights up on his forehead before shooting into her body. He comments that it's a trace of his will, something that normally sleeps in her spiritual world and only awakens if her life is truly threatened. He emphasizes that, per their agreement, he'll keep her safe, but he will not go around killing people for her. Golden light wraps around her, and once everything settles, Mohan bows in gratitude. Antares tells her there's no need to thank him since this is nothing more than a deal. Still trying to process what her teacher is up to, she urgently asks where her teacher is going. Normally Antares wouldn't bother explaining, but for our guy Lin's sake, he decided to educate her. He reveals that this entire world is actually a giant cage. Long ago, there used to be a passage leading outside, but it was sealed, trapping everyone inside. Furthermore, he explains that breaking the cage by force is almost impossible, but someone has managed to dig a small passage through it. If one can escape through that passage, then the outside world is limitless. Right now, her teacher is heading there to try his luck. Mohan asks if that path is extremely dangerous, and Antares lets out a long, irritated sigh. He already said it's a 9 in 10 death situation. Still, he notes that absolute despair always hides a sliver of hope. Mohan tries to ask more, but Antares remarks she's nowhere near as sharp as her brother, adding that if Lin were here, he wouldn't keep asking the same question. He then tells her that if she wants more in-depth answers, she'll need to make a deal with him just like her teacher and her brother did. Complete his tasks, and she'll receive what she seeks. Without hesitation, Mohan asks what he wants. Antares waves her off, saying she's nowhere near qualified. Come talk to him after she reaches half-step Supreme Divine, sounding a little too dismissive. Mohan doesn't take offense. Instead, she smiles and notes that in Antares' eyes, Lin must be far more exceptional than she is. Antares openly admits Lin is remarkable, the best he's ever seen, and it's precisely because of Lin that Mohan even gets the privilege of speaking with him right now. But at this point, his patience has officially run out. With a casual tap of his finger, he tells her to come back once she reaches that level, then considers their conversation finished. A swirling vortex tears open behind her, and before she can respond, she gets pulled in and teleported away. In the next scene, we see Mo Xinghai and the old emperor, both waiting anxiously for the elixir. He asks Grandpa Shu how the soul fusion potion is coming along, and Gramps calmly notes that everything is ready, including Meng Anwen's soul fusion formation array. The emperor, meanwhile, brings up a more troubling development. Other nations have now started encountering signs of soul-eater parasitism as well. The news has clearly slipped out, and those countries are now joining forces to pressure the empire for the potion's formula. Considering this concerns the survival of the entire human race, rejecting them outright might not be an option. Mo Xinghai realizes there's no point in arguing over who leaked the information anymore. Instead, he remarks that with the truth out, those factions might soon produce their own batch of rising geniuses. But Grandpa Shu waves off the concern, explaining he already tweaked the recipe. The new version kills the soul eaters just fine, but they won't get a single drop of the soul energy inside. The Emperor nods in approval. This was something Lin worked tirelessly to obtain, so handing it over carelessly is out of the question. Still, he adds, they might as well use this opportunity to trade for resources. Both Mo Xinghai and Grandpa Shu agree. After all, the Empire has poured an absurd amount of effort and resources into this whole operation, and it's time for other nations to pay their share. Sometime later, our boy makes it back to the small courtyard and reunites with his teacher. By now, Lin has hit level 63, and White Divine pats him on the shoulder, absolutely loving the insane pace of his growth. But the mood shifts quickly as he grows serious and informs Lin that the formation is complete. He further explained that they're performing their final checks, and once everything is locked in, the formation will activate. Asking if Lin is truly ready, Lin simply tells him not to worry, saying he will make it happen. A while later, our guy stands before the massive formation. The surrounding land cleared out entirely to make room for its colossal scale. A formation this big is basically an open invitation for both the Demon Emperor and Dragon Emperor to cause trouble. But crossing realms limits their strength, and Lin still has 6 of these divine law crystals up his sleeve, which might tip the balance if things go sideways. He briefly wonders what his sister has been up to lately, and wishes she were here. If she were, she could share in the soul power generated by this ritual. Meng Anwen suddenly appears beside him. He tells Lin to focus purely on the center of the formation, and the rest is their responsibility. Then Meng ascends into the sky and summons the divine tower. Massive red chains crash down and clamp firmly into the earth, completely sealing off the place. The formation roars to life, gold light shooting into the sky as Lin steps into the very center. Everything is finally ready. Meng Anwen raises his hand and announces, Soul Fusion Formation Array activate. But that's only the beginning. At the exact same time, a golden pillar erupts straight into the sky above Xiajing Academy, and then another blasts upward in the imperial capital. Furthermore, within seconds, every major formation node scattered across the entire empire lights up one after another like a continent-sized circuit board powering on for the first time. If we zoomed out and looked from above, the whole empire would appear drowned in golden light, almost like it's carved into the land itself. At the very center, the effect is even more overwhelming. Strands of light begin materializing around Lin, densely packed. Turns out each one represents a soul eater being reeled in from its host. White Divine estimates the total number must have exceeded 2 million by now. Lin remains perfectly calm, reciting the chant as golden light threads outward. Across the empire, every parasitized professional suddenly glows behind the back, a tiny portal tearing open and yanking the things straight out of them. The same scene repeats everywhere as they all flow directly into the formation array. Those streams of light all funneled into our guy, converting into pure soul energy and flooding into his body. The amount becomes nearly visible to the naked eye. From Lin's perspective, the system notification flooded him with each confirmed kill bringing in 20 million experience points. Everything is proceeding flawlessly. He levels up again, but this time he clearly feels something different. He realizes that perhaps the nature of leveling up is fundamentally tied to the strengthening of the soul itself. His teacher watched from afar, absolutely thrilled, remarking that this was indeed a massive opportunity. They can feel Lin's aura skyrocketing at a terrifying rate, though at the same time allowing them to absorb some of the excess energy spilling out. But despite the excitement, White Divine never relaxes. He almost asserts those bastards out there definitely won't sit still and let this ritual complete. Golden light keeps pouring into Lin, his level climbing like crazy, when suddenly a spatial rift tears open in the sky. The terrifying pressure rolling out of it even makes White Divine's pupils shrink. Thunder roars through the clouds, and something seemed to be walking out. White Divine immediately gets prepared energy condensing around his fist as he roars that he knew they wouldn't just watch quietly. Meng Anwen keeps the divine tower burning at full output, guarding the formation as best he can. They're still unsure whether the incoming threat is from the dragon or the abyss, but either way, neither side will be allowed to interfere. Then, a deafening roar splits the air. The next moment, their faces twist in disbelief. Charging out of the portal is none other than the Baron Beast King. Old Ning and Old Mo rush over from the other side, equally shocked. And arriving with them is Feng Chang'an, the Feng family's patriarch, also a divine level. He declares they must prevent these creatures from entering the human world at all costs. We shift perspectives, revealing the culprit behind this disaster, the Dragon Emperor himself. He mocks the idiotic humans, saying he doesn't need to lift a hand. All he has to do is connect the barren land to the human world and let chaos play out. But before he can bask in his own genius, a violent backlash slams into him. He coughs up a massive mouthful of blood, the price for forcibly punching open the portal. Even so, he asserts that destroying the human race makes any injury worthwhile. The spatial channel grows more stable by the second, its energy becoming more terrifying with every pulse. The old folks know they must destroy it now before it fully solidifies. Meng Anwen is already pushing the divine tower to its limits, but even he is nearly tapped out. Lin, of course, knows exactly what's happening outside, and he understands he must finish his transformation as fast as possible. The Demon Emperor, meanwhile, had been watching silently, stroking his chin with an amused grin. He notes that since the Dragon Emperor has made his move, it's his turn as well. Abyssal flames ignite around him, and a portal rips open above the array. Everyone immediately realizes that the Demon Emperor has arrived too. A massive hand reaches through the portal, aiming straight for our guy. But our guy came prepared and summoned the Skeleton King. A towering bone throne materializes, and the Skeleton King rises from within. Our boy instantly activates his mighty soldiers, and both the Skeleton King's stats, as well as its aura, skyrockets, wings spreading wide as he swings his greatsword with enough force to rattle the sky. White Divine glances over and is shocked by the sight. He remarks in shock that this summoned creature is terrifyingly strong. Strong enough that he can feel divine-level power radiating from it. He's stunned, wondering when Lin even awakened a skill like this. The Skeleton King swings his blade in a clean arc, unleashing a god-slaying strike first, followed immediately by elemental rampage. Both skills explode upward at the incoming giant hand, colliding dead-on. For a split second it actually looks promising, until the Demon Emperor's hand suddenly clenches. One deafening crack later, every ounce of that combined attack shatters into meaningless dust. The hand descends again with unstoppable momentum. The Skeleton King leaps in front and activates limitless defense, his massive frame looking pitifully small beneath the massive hand. But unbelievably, the defense actually holds, but only for a second. Then the Demon Emperor simply grabs him. With a single ruthless squeeze, the Skeleton King explodes into scattered bone fragments. Our boy was shocked. Even amplified to divine-level strength, even facing only a weakened projection, the Skeleton King still gets swatted like nothing. He has no idea how this is even possible. That's when a mocking voice echoes in his mind. Antares, of course, laughing and asking if Lin's gone stupid from fear. Before Lin can respond, a blazing phoenix tears across the sky. Antares tells him to stop spacing out, saying that's just his will attached to the girl. And riding atop that phoenix is none other than Mo Han. She channels everything into a full-power strike, and the fire phoenix slams into the giant hand, flames erupting across its surface. Lin watches in shock, seeing his sister actually injure the Demon Emperor. Could it be that she had already reached divine level? If so, then her leveling speed is just insane. But she isn't done. A second skill erupts, a violent inferno smashing against the palm again. Yet when the smoke clears, the Demon Emperor's hand keeps falling unhindered. Only the Phoenix's first strike, infused with a tiny bit of Antares' power, had managed to leave a mark, while her own direct attack barely registers. Still, that brief opening is all Lin needs. He fills his summoning space instantly, maxing out the Skellies once again, and merges them into the Skeleton King once more. He prepares to repeat the strategy, but Antares cuts him off, telling him to stop wasting energy. His skills simply won't work here because the gap between them isn't numbers or attributes, but something fundamental. Lin demands to know why. Antares explains that this is the difference created by the power of law. No matter how high the stats, no matter how reinforced the summon, a being wielding law simply erases anything beneath it. Even if their attributes were identical, the result would always be instant annihilation. Mohan drops in front of Lin, her twin blades glowing as two embedded pearls flare to life. White Divine catches sight and points out that those are the Earthfire pearls, legendary relics containing the flames of the planetary core. He didn't expect the old man to hand something this crazy to Mohan. Energy builds violently around her weapons. With a sharp command, her blades split into countless flying swords, all streaking toward the giant hand. Borrowing the pearl's power, she manages to produce a faint trace of law, but only a sliver, nowhere near enough to stop what's coming. Antares remarks that unless a miracle shows up, they won't be able to survive the next strike. And that's exactly when a sword suddenly streaks across the battlefield, too fast for the eye to follow. A heartbeat later, the Demon Emperor's massive hand trembles as the sword manages to sever two of the Demon Emperor's fingers. It's Jiang Yi's demon-slaying sword. The attack worked, and the hand is forced to halt. But the Demon Emperor growls that with Jiang Yi's half-dead condition, he still dares to dream about stopping him, then calls it ridiculous. Jiang Yi doesn't bother arguing. He simply states that he will find out soon enough. The severed fingers regenerate instantly, and the hand surges downward again and the two sides clash mid-air. Meanwhile, on the other side, the old folks are sweating bullets. It was clear that the Baron Beast King had already pushed most of its body through the portal, and they can feel dozens more behind it, ready to flood in. And if they ever manage to break through, then humanity is absolutely finished. Even with the help of White Divine, Meng Anwen can only seal or bind one or two, but this many was impossible even for both of them. At this point, the old folks on the front line have already accepted the worst-case scenario. Feng grips his ancestral sword and declares that if the Beast King truly breaks through, he'll unleash their family's forbidden blade and drag it down with him. Old Mo shakes his head, insisting that won't be enough, and they'll need to use Sacred Horn from his family as well. Clearly, they were both ready to sacrifice themselves. Feng tightens his grip on the long sword and tells White Divine that if they die here today, he must look after their families. White Divine immediately scolds them for being idiots, snapping that it isn't over yet, not until the final moment. And right on cue, a new voice cuts through the battlefield, mocking them for talking life and death too early. Yan joins the action and swings his weapon with everything he has, unleashing a slash toward the Baron Beast just as it forces most of its body through the portal. The strike detonates with the power of law, and unbelievably, the beast is sliced cleanly in half the moment the blade hits. A creature they previously considered unkillable dies instantly. The old pals freeze, as they can clearly feel the power of law woven into that strike. White Divine asks Yan if he managed to break through. Yan bursts into laughter and proudly remarks that it's all thanks to Lin's law crystals. With them, he managed to comprehend the rule of slaughter. Antares' voice resurfaces in Lin's mind, telling him to take a good look, saying that is the power of law. He adds that these barren beasts aren't truly immortal, as they stand no chance in front of such power. Lin glances down at the several law crystals in his own hand. He quietly asks Antares whether using one would allow him to kill these monsters as well. Antares replies yes. These crystals were formed from the life's essence of the Thunder God. Their explosive force would easily surpass what Yan just managed to do. But Lin isn't satisfied. Killing the beasts isn't enough. He needs to destroy the entire portal altogether. Yet that passage was constructed with the Dragon Emperor's own power layered atop a strong formation, meaning destroying it won't be easy. Antares agrees, noting that with Lin's current strength, it's not possible. Lin tightens his grip around the crystals, silent for a moment. Then he finally speaks, asking Antares to help him. Antares then asked why he should. Lin doesn't even think about it. He simply remarks that it's because Antares is his friend. When Antares hears our boy calling him his friend, that word hits differently. Antares pauses for a second and reflects that he can't even remember the last time anyone used that word around him. The big fella almost smiles, but of course, he immediately puts the tsundere mask back on and declares that not just anyone is qualified to be his friend. Anyway, before Lin can even react, the divine crystals in his hand suddenly rise into the air. He immediately guessed Antares had decided to help him. The crystals shoot upward, fly straight into the passage connecting to the barren land, causing a massive explosion that erupts at the entrance. The incoming barren beasts are instantly blasted back. Nobody even knows what just happened, but they can all tell the tunnel is collapsing. Meanwhile, Meng Anwen lets out a sigh of relief, saying the human race just dodged a disaster. He notes that judging from the direction of the attack, it must have been Lin's doing. At the same time, the Demon Emperor's hand trembles slightly, looking a little hesitant, or perhaps a little anxious, as he clearly sensed something terrifying. And right then, Jiang Yi swings his sword. The Demon Emperor made a point-blank decision, and immediately pulled his hand back. The next second, the tunnel begins sealing shut. Lin looks pleasantly surprised and says the Demon Emperor really backed off. Antares, however, scoffs and remarks that the guy simply sensed his aura and ran for his life. Mohan rushes over and asks if Lin is all right. Lin tells her he's fine and thanks her for coming to help. She finally relaxes and says that as long as he's safe, that's all that matters. The old folks land beside them shortly after, and White Divine immediately asks about Dee's whereabouts. When Mohan tells them her teacher has already left the human world, everyone understands instantly. Meng sighs and notes that the old man has probably gone to that place. Suddenly, the formation beneath them lights up again. Strands of energy gather around them. Lin obviously wasn't able to absorb everything, so the excess soul energy spills out, and everyone nearby benefits a little. Yan remarks, thanks to Lin, it seems like they're also going to walk away with some extra perks. White Divine then turns around and asks how our boy is feeling. Lin flashes a confident grin and says it feels great, adding that he's already level 69. Then Antares' voice echoes once more, telling Lin it's time to come see him. Meanwhile, over in the dragon world, the Dragon Emperor looks absolutely miserable. He pants heavily, curses under his breath, and rages about the massive cost he paid to set up that formation. So many materials, so much sacrifice, now all ruined. Blood spills from his eyes, nose, and mouth as he screams that he'll kill Lin no matter the price. A command instantly spreads from his palace across the entire dragon world. He demands full mobilization and orders preparations to attack the human world. Orders cascade down the ranks. Dragons begin gathering, each one looking fired up and ready for war. But then the sky above them suddenly cracks open, and something is forcing its way out. A horrifying aura spreads, shaking them to their souls. Fear grips every dragon nearby, and they beg their Dragon Emperor to save them. From the void, a massive foot emerges and slams down onto the palace. The Dragon Emperor roars in fury, demands to know who dares trespass into the dragon world, then charges upward, declaring the intruder is courting death, though the poor bastard doesn't even last a second. The strike was so overwhelming that he was smashed straight back down with no way to resist. His body crashes into the ground, carving out a massive crater. The palace is already reduced to rubble. Flames continue burning inside the pit. The Dragon Emperor lies there, trembling, his face filled with despair as he asks why Antares would attack him. A voice echoes from the void, cold and absolute. He tells him this is the consequence of luring the barren beast into the human world, a clear violation of the three-race agreement. Antares further explained that this time is only a warning, and if it happens again, his entire race will be slaughtered. And just like that, the sky returns to normal. All that's left behind is ruins, corpses, and silence. The scene then shifts back to the abyss. Over here, the Demon Emperor looks much calmer. He swirls a glass of wine and reflects that his senses couldn't have been wrong, and he is 100% certain that the brief aura earlier definitely belonged to Antares. But according to the three-race agreement, Antares isn't supposed to interfere in conflicts between them. So why step in this time? It had to be the Dragon Emperor's stupidity. He remarks that trying to lure the barren beasts over was reckless beyond belief. Did that fool seriously think the human race couldn't deal with the barren beast king on their own? Pulling a stunt like that and provoking Antares, he declares that's not strategy. That's practically begging for extinction. Meanwhile, he reassures himself that he didn't break any rules. Since he stayed within the agreement, Antares has no grounds to punish him. As for the Dragon Emperor, he says he couldn't care less what happens to that fool. Return to our boy who's currently riding the ancient phoenix toward the eternal trial ground. He wonders what Antares wants this time. Not long after he arrives, and Antares remarks that the brat finally showed up. Lin immediately gets serious and asks what he needs to do. Antares snorts and tells him to tone it down. He's only level 69. If he wants to talk big, he should wait until he becomes a supreme divine. Lin pauses, slightly confused, realizing he doesn't actually know why he was called here. Antares explains that Lin has been leveling up too fast and absorbing massive amounts of soul energy. Does he really think he can digest all of that alone? Antares says he'll help stabilize and sort out the energy inside him. After all, the third-class transfer is critical if Lin wants to become a supreme divine. He tells Lin to sit. Lin listens immediately and crosses his legs. Following Antares' instructions, he closes his eyes, enters meditation, and drops all mental resistance. Antares senses the timing and releases a wave of energy from his claws, covering Lin's body. Across the eternal trial ground, beams of light suddenly rise from different locations, and then it fails. More accurately, Antares is rejected. He stares at Lin in shock and asks what exactly exists inside his spiritual world. Lin calmly lists a few items: the divine cauldron, the domain stone, and some other treasures. But before he can finish, Antares cuts him off, clearly stunned that Lin possesses the cauldron. Lin recalls obtaining divinity a while back and admits that's when he got it. He casually notes he might have forgotten to mention it earlier. Antares immediately starts complaining, saying if he had known Lin had something that ridiculous, why even bother calling him over, adding that Lin doesn't need his help at all. Lin quickly realizes that means once he reaches level 70, he can directly undergo his third-class transfer. Antares confirms it. However, Lin still has leftover soul energy to fully refine, so Antares tells him to absorb it here first, then prepare for what comes next. Lin suppresses his excitement and nods. With Antares guarding him, there's zero risk. He begins refining the remaining soul energy. Experience keeps rising. Strands of energy wrap around him. Antares silently reflects that this kid carries terrifying levels of secrets and fortune. The more he learns about this brat, the stronger his belief grows that Lin is destined to become a supreme divine. A while later, Lin finally levels up, reaching level 70, all the while completely absorbing the remaining soul energy. Antares simply says, "Good," then prepares to take him somewhere else for the big moment. With a casual wave, the two teleport away. When Lin opens his eyes again, they're standing in the barren land. The place isn't exactly new to him, and he recalls his teacher had brought him here for his second-class transfer. But their arrival immediately draws attention. A swarm of barren beasts rushes toward them. Antares calmly tells Lin to focus on what he needs to do, and everything else is his responsibility. Lin says thanks and sits down on the spot. He pulls out all the materials required for his third-class transfer, including the stuff for profession evolution as well. One of them is the Divine Talent Stone. Almost instantly, he feels the power of law pouring into his body. It starts as a single beam of light, then multiplies rapidly. He realizes the essence of third-class transfer is basically just infusing law power directly into the soul. Lin feels like he's entered a strange space containing only himself. It's a sensation he's never experienced before. At the same time, his profession begins to change. A surge of overwhelming energy erupts, and his profession evolves into the eternal undead emperor. He slowly opens his eyes and feels the power coursing through him. He notes that from this moment on, he is the eternal undead emperor, the one and only ruler of the undying world. A vision appears in his mind. He holds a scythe. A skeletal dragon hovers in the sky. Beneath him stretches an endless skeleton army. Suddenly, the Divine Talent Stone shatters. With that complete, it's time for talent awakening. The system announces he has obtained the talent Rebirth. Immediately after, it detects the new talent and begins optimization. Lin isn't surprised. The system always appears when he gains something new. Not long after, optimization completes, and our boy obtains yet another divine-level talent, Total Renewal. He wastes no time examining it. Total Renewal allows both the summoner and all summons to revive upon death, restore to peak condition, and reset all skill cooldowns. It can activate once every 10 minutes. That is absolutely broken. Lin thinks the exact same thing. A resurrection every 10 minutes and allowing him to reset all his skill cooldowns. Combined with his already absurd lifelink and damage transfer talent, he's basically untouchable. A faint smile forms on our boy's face. From this moment on, he notes that even the Demon Emperor and Dragon Emperor would have an extremely hard time truly killing him. Besides the new talent, Lin also gains several fresh skills. First up, Summon Headless Knight. Curiosity kicks in, so he summons it immediately. A massive figure appears, still wearing tattered, broken armor. Makes sense, though. It's only level 1, just a little black iron tier rookie for now. but leveling it up is only a matter of time. More importantly, Lin notes that his undead army just expanded again, and that's the most important part. Next skill, Undead Gaze. This one catches his attention. Aside from Soul Flame, he now has another soul-type attack, and that alone already sounds dangerous. And then comes Skeletal Spear. Once activated, a long spear appears in his hand. It's a physical damage-type skill with insane penetration. The damage scales with skill level and spirit attribute. Lin has to admit this third-class transfer was an absolute roller coaster. Still, he remarks that the actual power of these skills needs testing. With all that out of the way, our boy stands up and announces he succeeded. But when he looks for Antares, what he sees nearly shocks him. In front of him lies a mountain of barren beast corpses, piled high on top of each other with the ground still scorching. Antares shrugs and says those pests wouldn't stop coming, so he simply wiped them out. Anyway, Antares asks how it went. Lin tells him it was a complete success. His profession elevated, and he awakened a new talent. That immediately grabs Antares' interest, so he tells Lin to explain. Lin starts by stating his new profession is Eternal Undead Emperor. Antares strokes his chin, saying the name sounds familiar, like he's heard it somewhere before, but he can't quite place it. Before he can think further, Lin says he wants to test his new talent. Antares asks how. Lin calmly tells him to kill him. For a second, Antares probably thinks this kid has lost his mind, but Lin is completely serious. He summons his entire skeleton army, including the Lich General. He repeats the request clearly. Kill him. Then he even throws in a little provocation, asking if Antares can't handle something that simple. Antares has no idea what Lin is planning. He doesn't know what kind of stunt this is. But faced with such a bizarre request, he remarks that he's more than willing to entertain it. The next second, Antares rises into the air. A blazing flame gathers in his mouth and launches straight toward Lin. After the weird request, our guy basically gets exactly what he asked for. The whole ground erupts like literal hellfire, and not a single skeleton is anywhere in sight. Antares just lets out a cold snort and notes how Lin's undead army collapses the moment it touches his flames, clearly implying the kid was overestimating himself. But before he can even finish that thought, a figure suddenly appears right in front of him. Seems like through lifelink and damage transfer, the skellies took the brunt of the blast, and Lin strolls back in, acting like a smug brat, practically asking if that was really all Antares could do. Antares obviously held back earlier, so now he decides to show what half-step supreme divine power actually looks like. The moment the attack landed, Lin's body outright shatters and disappears without a trace. By now, Antares can no longer sense Lin's aura at all, and he reflects on whether the kid was trying to test something, though there's a hint of concern in his voice. But what he saw next leaves even him stunned. Those skeletons he burned to ashes slowly rose from the ground, and Lin's body is slowly piecing itself back together as well. Lin casually remarks that the attack feels not bad, completely forgetting he was just deleted from existence a second ago. Meanwhile, Antares is trying to figure out how the hell Lin pulled that off. He's certain he wiped out the entire undead legion down to the last bone. And that's when he realizes it. This must have been exactly what Lin wanted to test, some sort of new skill or innate talent. Lin flashes a grin and spills the truth, announcing his new talent, Total Renewal. He explains how the talent works, and even someone like Antares can't hide his shock. He remarks how absurdly powerful it is. Reviving every 10 minutes means even someone like the Demon Emperor would struggle to kill him if Lin simply wanted to get away. But our guy simply tightens his fist and declares it still isn't enough, insisting that it won't be long before he personally settles things with both the dragon and the abyss. Anyway, a while later, the two teleport away. This time, Antares leads him straight into the lower level of the Eternal Trial Grounds, specifically the Meteor Fall continent. He tells Lin this is one of the most dangerous continents out there, though both the Dragon King's palace and the primordial secret realm are hidden somewhere out here. Lin notes his gratitude, but before he can take in the scenery, a blazing meteor suddenly tears across the sky and slams into the ground, blowing open the terrain. It only took about a second for our guy to figure out how the place got its name. Observing the impact, he admits the meteor's destructive force is easily on par with a level 85 boss attack. Either way, before pushing any deeper, he decides this is the perfect spot to grind a few of his new skills. With that in mind, He repeatedly summons the headless knight, planning to run it through the old-fashioned way. Meanwhile, over in the Demon Emperor's palace, things take a dark turn. A dragon-like creature lies chained up, covered in wounds so severe it's hard to tell if it's even alive. The Demon Emperor approaches, and the creature trembles weakly. He casually slices the poor thing open again, extracts the blood, and pours himself a fresh cup of it like it's fine wine. While enjoying his drink, he remarks how foolish Antares is for sending Lin into the lower level. With Antares guarding the kid, he says he wouldn't dare to make a move. But in the lower level, things are very different. And perhaps that idiot Dragon Emperor ever caught wind of this, he'd definitely be interested. News spreads fast and someone is already rushing to report everything to the Dragon Emperor. The moment he hears it, he grits his teeth so hard you can practically hear the killing intent leaking out. Without hesitation, he demands that his forces move out. Meanwhile, our guy finally pushes his headless knight to level 70. Stat-wise, it looks solid, but the skills are what really turn this thing into a nightmare. First, there's the charge attack, which allows the knight to charge at the speed of 3,000 meters per second and deal 5 times its strength in damage. Then comes the defensive skill, allowing the knight to throw up a group protective barrier that stacks when there are multiple knights around. And lastly, a passive that flat out ignores every debuff and negative effect thrown at it. The only downside is that he can't summon too many of them, but at the very least, he can now deploy them to lead the rest of his undead army in a full-scale assault. Anyway, he still has 2 other skills that need leveling, so he plans to grind for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, a massive number of dragons have gathered nearby. They've already confirmed Lin's location, and the dense undead aura ahead tells them this is the place. Lin is a little surprised the dragon was so quick to send people after him, but honestly, to him, this feels like dinner delivering itself to his doorstep. Suddenly, a wave of flames erupts above him, and a massive green eye materializes in the sky. The dragons freeze, stunned by something they've never seen before. But before any of them can react, emerald flames out of nowhere and ignites on their body. Their expressions go blank, and in the next instant, they all drop from the sky like puppets with cut strings. No screams, no struggle, and they don't even look like they felt a thing. Lin notes how terrifying the skill was, saying it's almost like their souls were burned out in a single heartbeat. He reflects that without special item or defensive skill, anyone below level 80 would get one tapped by this thing without even realizing what hit them. There were still plenty of dragons left floating around, so Lin decides it's the perfect time to test out his skeletal spear. A bone spear materializes in his hand. He takes aim and casually tosses it upward. One poor bastard barely notices something coming his way before his entire body gets pierced clean through. Lin basically looks like he's running an aimbot program. Each throw lands perfectly, dropping targets one after another. Meanwhile, one spear doesn't slow down at all after tearing through its victim. It keeps flying until it collides with a falling meteor. The impact detonates the meteor mid-air, and something drops out of the explosion. Intrigued, he wondered if meteors now have loot inside of them. Not planning to waste time with the remaining dragons, he rises into the sky and triggers Corpse Explosion. A series of massive explosions erupts overhead, ending the fight in seconds. He then rushes toward the strange rock that fell earlier. His detection spell tells him it's a starlight crystal, condensed from the power of the star god. Lin has heard all kinds of divine titles before, but this one is completely unfamiliar to him, and he recalls absolutely no records mentioning this name, which, he notes, means the god is either incredibly low-key or just incredibly weak. But considering even the lower-level gods like the fire god and water god have historical mentions, so why is this one absent? As he holds the crystal, he's starting to believe that the meteor shower that's raged on for countless years might actually be what's left of the god's power. To confirm, he decides to fire off another test shot. He summons another skeletal spear, aims, and lets it fly. The meteor explodes again, and Lin darts over to catch the crystal. But right as he grabs it, another meteor streaks past him and drops toward the ground. Below is a scorpion-like monster, and this thing looks ready, almost waiting for the opportunity. It leaps up, clamps the meteor in its pincers, crushes it, and snatches the crystal inside. Lin watches in surprise as the creature immediately starts chewing it down. Its power flares stronger by the second, and it was clear to him that the bosses here can power up by devouring these crystals. Before he can do anything else, a group of human professionals arrives. Judging from their outfit, he notes they're from the Galen Guild. They quickly surround the Scorpion boss and begin a coordinated raid. Since he doesn't want to spark unnecessary drama, Lin decides to leave them to their hunt and turns to head out. But the moment he spins around, his expression shifts. Something massive appears overhead, and the pressure alone tells him exactly who it is: the Dragon King. The Dragon King clearly senses him as well, and attacks instantly without a hint of hesitation. Lin knows this is bad, noting this is his first time seeing a Dragon King in person, and beings at this tier are on par with human divine level and that of a demon lord. He definitely didn't expect them to send over an actual Dragon King after him. The sudden appearance of a Dragon King pulls the full attention of the Galen Guild as well. Everyone freezes in disbelief, wondering why a Dragon King is in the lower level at all. It isn't hard for them to tell Lin is only level 70, but none of them can figure out why a Dragon King would personally descend just to take him out. One of the raid members nervously asks their captain whether they should jump in and help the kid. The captain raises his shield and immediately snaps back, saying of course they should, adding that they're all human, and there's no way they're just going to stand there watching one of their own get slaughtered. But he also notes they need to finish off this Scorpion boss first. Leaving it alive would only make everything worse. So he calls out to Lin, telling him to come over so they can deal with the threat together. Lin reflects that the Galen Guild really lives up to its reputation, and he never once had a bad experience with them. They've always been that kind of people. Even if they don't know you, the second they see a Dragon King coming after you, they don't hesitate to step in. With a confident grin, he tells them to stay focused on the boss, and he'll handle the Dragon King himself. And with a single wave of his hand, the sky darkens. In mere seconds, the undead army floods onto the battlefield. Skellies pack the air around him, and then the ground trembles as a throne materializes. Rising from it is the Skeletal King. Meanwhile, the Headless Knight rushes forward at full speed, activating its skill and leading the charge. Meanwhile, the Skeletal King lifts his giant sword, and with a thunderous swing, he brings it crashing down toward the Dragon King. The Skellies go charging in headfirst and crash straight into the dragon, staggering it just enough for the big boy to land a massive, crushing blow. Blood starts pouring down like rain, and our boy notes that the Skeleton King's attack is certainly on par with a divine-level strike. No wonder it can actually wound the Dragon King. But that alone wasn't enough. The Dragon King's wounds start healing. And not just healing, but regenerating insanely fast. The next second, the dragon opens its mouth and unleashes a blazing stream of fire straight at the Skellies. Lifelink kicks in instantly, and the Lich General follows up right away with Legion Healing, cleansing the burn effect while restoring everyone back to full health. Meanwhile, the siege continues. This time, the Skeleton King steps up and uses Elemental Rampage. A deafening explosion erupts, and just like that, half of the Dragon King's body gets blown apart. By this point, the Dragon King is clearly furious as he's never taken a hit like that before. In a fit of rage, he activates Bloodline Awakening. A terrifying surge of power bursts out, and with golden light covering his body, he transforms into his humanoid form. But the aura? Way stronger than before. He scoffs, questioning how a mere fake divine-level summon could even stand against him, and then he charges straight at the Skeleton King. Their weapons collide in a heavy clash, but meanwhile our boy doesn't just sit back. He summons a bone spear, spots the opening, and hurls it without hesitation. Out of the corner of his eye, the Dragon King senses something incoming. He quickly raises his weapon to block, but the moment it hits, he's visibly shocked by the sheer force behind it. He can't help but wonder how a level 70 skill could possibly carry this much power. At that point, Lin quietly realizes that after his third-class transfer, even ordinary divine-level beings aren't really a threat to him anymore. Seeing that faint, almost mocking look on Lin's face, the Dragon King gets even more irritated. He lashes out, saying that a mere human has no right to ignore his authority. Then he swings his weapon, blasting the Skeleton King backward before immediately activating another skill, pouring all his power into his spear and locking onto Lin. Meanwhile, our boy activates both Mighty Soldiers and Overcharge in response. Then he follows up with Undead Gaze. A massive eye appears in the sky, and in the very next second, the Dragon King suddenly freezes mid-motion. A kind of pain he's never felt before crashes into him. His body loses control and starts falling, and he screams as he realizes what's happening.
He can't understand how anything could bypass his soul defenses and start burning his soul directly. He panics, he struggles, but nothing works. Meanwhile, the burning only gets worse, eating away at his soul completely. In his final moments, he curses Lin, but before he can even finish, his entire body is reduced to ashes. System notification pops up informing our guy the Dragon King has been defeated. 900 million experience gained, along with a handful of military merits. Anyway, talk about power creep. As our boy starts checking the loot, he notes something strange. Normally, taking down a divine-level enemy would grant him a full star, but this time, that wasn't the case. He quickly figures that perhaps becoming a 5-star general probably requires killing more than just one divine-level opponent. As he lands, he notices purple crystal beneath where the Dragon King fell. He uses the detection spell and learns it's a crystal formed after the death of a divine-level dragon. But before he can even pick it up, the Genesis Scepter suddenly appears and absorbs the crystal on its own. He pauses for a second, a bit surprised, but then it clicks. The life core inside the scepter must be recovering, just not sure how many of those crystals it's going to need. That thought suddenly hits him. Maybe if he could absorb the Dragon Emperor's crystal, then it might fully restore the scepter. Sounds tempting. But then again, he notes that guy is stingy as hell, so yeah, probably not happening anytime soon. Meanwhile, while he's casually thinking all this through, everyone else nearby is completely stunned. The Galen Guild straight up freezes, saying they haven't even finished dealing with their own boss, and yet our guy already went ahead and solo killed a Dragon King. They glance at each other, wondering why they haven't heard of him before. Some of them figure maybe they've just been stuck here too long and lost touch with the outside world. Others, a bit more observant, recall the aura that flashed from Lin's badge earlier, saying it felt exactly like a divine general. That realization hits even harder. And when they connect the dots, a divine general being so young, there's really only one person it could be, and that is, of course, Lin. Meanwhile, the scene shifts over to the Dragon World. Tatar and Tashel are summoned personally by the Dragon Emperor. They report that all preparations are complete, wondering if they'll be sent to deal with Lin. The Dragon Emperor remarks that Lin will definitely be killed, no question about it, but that's not why he called them here today. Instead, he says he needs something from them. Then he slowly raises a hand. The two brothers look confused, asking what it is he could possibly need from them. The Dragon Emperor just grins, and in the next instant clenches his fist and both of their bodies explode on the spot. Turns out, what he wanted all along was the ancestral dragon blood inside them. He calmly gathers the blood into each hand and starts absorbing it. After being injured by Antares, his wounds haven't been healing properly. One portion of the blood goes toward healing himself, while the other he sets aside as a reward meant for whoever manages to kill Lin. Because honestly, he doesn't think those two ever stood a chance anyway. But here's the wild part. He straight up blames their deaths on Lin. He claims that in order to deal with Lin, he had no choice but to sacrifice 2 of his generals, and says Lin will have to pay the price for it. Then he issues a command across the entire Dragon World. He declares that anyone who manages to kill Lin will be rewarded with ancestral dragon blood. And just like that, chaos erupts. Countless figures shoot up into the sky all at once, rushing out in a frenzy, fighting to be the first. The sky gets torn open, forming a massive rift that directly connects to the eternal trial grounds. Meanwhile, back to our boy, he's already getting close to the center of the Meteorfall continent. Along the way, he's spotted plenty of bosses. He notes that he still hasn't found the Dragon King Palace dungeon, and more importantly, the primordial rune hasn't reacted at all, which can only mean one thing. The secret realm isn't here either. Just then, something flickers in the distance. From the looks of it, an entrance is about to spawn. Around it, a strange streak of flowing light begins to form, shimmering in a way almost like it's alive. The monsters below are the first to react. They freeze for a split second, almost like they've been petrified, and then immediately scatter, fleeing as fast as they can. Lin watches closely and quickly realizes this has to be what he's been looking for. He sends the Headless Knight in first to test the waters. The skellies rush forward, closing the distance in seconds, but the moment they reach the glowing light, something terrifying happens. The light instantly spreads over the skeleton, swallowing it whole. And worse, it completely ignores his talent and lifelink. The next second, he was notified that one Headless Knight had been destroyed. Lin pauses, then notes that this flowing light isn't just energy, it's more like a strange and rather bizarre creature. It seems to contain its own internal space, capable of devouring anything that gets too close. Which made sense why all those monsters ran for their lives earlier. But instead of backing off, our guy comes up with a different idea. If it can swallow things, then he'll just overload it from the inside. Sound kinda weird, but whatever he says. Without hesitation, our guy summons all his skeletons at once. He doesn't believe that thing's internal space is truly infinite. The skeletons charge in like pure cannon fodder, and the creature doesn't hold back either and devours them all without mercy. Lin noted this was just the first step. He smirks slightly and notes that it's time for his skellies to cause some chaos inside. Almost immediately, the glowing light starts to behave strangely. It begins to swell, its surface distorting, followed by popping sounds breaking out from within. Looks like his theory was spot on. The creature suddenly panics. It turns and tries to escape, darting away as if something inside it is about to burst. In the next moment, it dives straight into the dungeon entrance, all the while spitting out all of the skellies. Seeing his theory worked, he decided to chase after it. At the same time, his Dragon King token is resonating with the dungeon. That pretty much confirms it. This is the place. A short while later, he arrives at the entrance. Floating pillars hover in the air ahead of him. Lin closes his eyes, letting the Dragon King token activate on its own. In the next instant, his figure vanishes. Meanwhile, the dragons chasing him arrive just a moment too late. They stop in place, clearly frustrated, saying they missed him by seconds. But what shocks them even more is the fact that what they believed was a dungeon that was supposed to belong to their race has just been entered by a human. With no other choice, they begin setting up defenses around the area. Of course, they know they can't deal with Lin alone, so they decide to wait for the Dragon Kings to arrive. Meanwhile, inside the Dragon King palace, Lin immediately senses that something feels off. He remarks that this dungeon is completely different from the others. He wasn't able to see any mobs, and it doesn't seem like it was designed for challengers to clear in the first place. Which raises a bigger question. What was it even created for? Before he can think further, a violent gust of wind explodes outward. A massive dragon descends right in front of him. The dragon looks slightly surprised, noting that the one who entered is actually a human. Seeing the dragon having some level of intelligence, Lin stays calm and explains that he's simply here to challenge the dungeon. The dragon snorts, but still explains the rules. To proceed, Lin needs to defeat it, and 4 other dragons. Then suddenly, a glowing orb-like creature hops onto the dragon's head. It stares at Lin with wide, curious eyes, clearly intrigued. Lin immediately recognizes that the little thing is the same flowing light that just escaped earlier. He doesn't dwell on it for long and instead asks about the first stage. Turns out it's simple. All he needs to do is survive under the dragon's attacks for 1 minute, and just to make things interesting, the dragon gives him 10 seconds to prepare. A short while later, the trial kicks off, and our boy immediately shields his face as the dragon wastes no time launching its first attack. A thick, toxic mist rolls out and blankets the area, while skeletal armor snaps into place and gets to work. He takes a quick moment to analyze the damage, calmly noting it's roughly on par with a level 75 attack. The dragon gave our boy a quick reminder that if he can't hold on, he should just say so. Otherwise, if he dies, that's on him. Anyway, a minute passes in no time, and the dragon begins pulling the toxic mist back in. Meanwhile, our guy just stands there looking completely unbothered, which clearly throws the dragon off. It pauses, visibly confused, as if asking how this kid is totally fine. Meanwhile, even the tiny bubble thingy perched on his head is staring wide-eyed in disbelief. Lin, on the other hand, notes that this dragon is definitely the real deal. It has intelligence, it speaks, it thinks. Sure, it sounds hostile, but at the same time, it deliberately kept the attack at level 75 and even gave a warning earlier. Honestly, that earns a bit of respect, so our boy referred to him as Dragon King. The dragon snorts, clearly not a big fan of the title, and corrects our guy that he is nothing like those so-called lower dragon species. He goes on to declare, with obvious arrogance, that he is an elemental dragon, then asks whether Lin even understands what that means. It then tells him he can address it as Lord Green Dragon, and without lingering any longer it flies off. noting that the first round is complete and telling him to wait right there. Before Lin can even ask about the second stage, a distant dragon's roar echoes from afar. It sounds like the green dragon is calling out to someone, telling them to wake up, already adding that someone has entered the dungeon. And if they don't get over here for the trial, the dragon god might just bite them to death. Sounding like the guy is literally waking someone up. Not long after, a violent gust surges through the area, and a massive azure dragon comes rushing in from the distance. It keeps rubbing its eyes, clearly half asleep, barely awake. Meanwhile, Lin senses its aura and immediately notes that this should be the wind elemental dragon. The newcomer doesn't waste time and quickly explains the next round. It's similar to before, but this time Lin has to endure for 2 minutes. Furthermore, according to the rules, it will use a stronger attack than before. Lin reinforces his skeletal armor just to be safe and states that he's ready. The wind dragon flicks its wings and instantly, terrifying blades of wind slice through the air. Right after that, it exhales a breath that forms into a roaring tornado. The skeletal armor glows a few times as it holds firm. Sure, the power is stronger this time, but Lin notes it's still nothing too serious. The attack continues relentlessly for the full 2 minutes, and eventually, the tornado fades away. The dragon looks impressed, remarking that it's no surprise someone with the Dragon King's token would perform this well, and adds that Lin is pretty solid. With that, it flies off. Immediately after, a burst of fire lights up the sky, and a red dragon engulfed in flames appears. It briefly explains that the rules are still simple. This time, Lin just needs to last 3 minutes. At this point, it almost feels like AFK farming. The attacks are intense, but in reality, they still haven't quite reached level 80. As long as Lin keeps reinforcing his skeletal armor, it won't even trigger his innate talents, which honestly makes things even easier. 3 minutes pass, and just like the others, the dragon wraps things up and flies off. Lin can't help but feel puzzled, noting how all of them seem in such a rush, almost like they're eager to get back to sleep. Still, he also observes that each dragon has its own distinct personality, which, frankly, makes the whole thing more interesting. And now he finds himself actually looking forward to whoever shows up next. Not long after, someone else arrives. This time, it's a blue dragon. This one feels different right away, more elegant, more composed. It greets him properly, and Lin is a little surprised to realize this dragon is female. She gently tells him he can call her Frost Dragon, or simply Ellie. Meanwhile, voices suddenly echo from above, other dragons impatiently telling her to stop chatting and hurry up with the trial since they all still want to get back to sleep. Ellie lets out a soft sigh and remarks that those guys are always so short-tempered. Anyway, the format remains the same, except this time it's 4 minutes. She even reminds him not to push himself too hard and risk getting hurt. The way she speaks feels genuinely kind and sounds like she really is concerned about our guy. Still, a trial is a trial. Ellie let out an icy breath. It looks powerful at first glance, but Lin quickly notes she was clearly holding back. He reflects for a moment, realizing this really is a gentle dragon. The skeletal armor glows faintly and easily blocks the incoming frost. Meanwhile, Lin casually reinforces it here and there, and just like that, 4 minutes pass without much pressure. Ellie congratulates him, noting that he's impressive and has passed her trial. Lin, in turn, acknowledges her and asks about the next round. Ellie pauses briefly, then tells him the 5th trial will be different and also harder and potentially dangerous. She advises him to be prepared and further adds that if anything feels wrong, he can call it off immediately and they'll stop in time. Lin immediately picks up on one key word she used, not she or her, but they. Very soon, the fire dragon is the first to reappear, and meanwhile, the other dragons return one after another. In no time, all 4 surround him. The rule is still simple, but this time, he has to withstand all of them attacking together for a full 5 minutes. The trial begins almost instantly. 4 different elemental attacks crash toward Lin at the same time. Meanwhile, Lin casually remarked that the rules never said he couldn't fight back. The fire dragon doesn't seem to mind at all. In fact, it goes as far as telling our guy that not only can he fight back, but even killing them would be acceptable, of course, if he actually can. That's all Lin needs to hear. He immediately dashes upward and summons the rest of his skeletal army. Leading the charge is the headless knight, but the sudden shift catches the dragons off guard as they clearly didn't expect him to be a summoner. A group of them slam into the green dragon, staggering him for just a second before he swats them away, but it doesn't matter. More kept coming. Then, the green dragon unleashes a massive poisonous breath, yet it's immediately countered by legion healing. The skeletons recover, regroup, and charge for the second time, climbing onto the dragon and hacking away relentlessly. Now the big guy is starting to panic, loudly calling for the others to help him. Meanwhile, the other dragons are already busy dealing with their own problems. One of them remarks that they are busy and he's on his own, calling him by his real name, Givus. Then suddenly, the bubble-looking thingy that had been hiding all this time finally makes its move. A detection spell quickly tells our guy that this was a level 85 rainbow critter. In reality, Lin had never taken his attention off that little thing all this time. As it begins to expand, preparing to devour the skeletons, Lin lets out a faint smirk and calmly notes that it finally couldn't hold back anymore. And honestly, he's been waiting for this moment. In the very next second, Lin makes his move. A terrifying presence unfolds as he unleashes undead gaze, and immediately the fire dragon lifts its head, clearly startled, trying to make sense of what it's seeing. A massive eye manifests in the air, locking directly onto the rainbow critter. Meanwhile, the little thing seems to sense the danger almost instantly. It tries to retreat, bouncing back in panic, but it's already too late. The attack still lands. It bounces a few times before scrambling back toward the green dragon, diving straight into his fur to hide. A clear burn mark is left on its body, clearly taking some damage. Meanwhile, Gavus completely loses it. He stares in disbelief, practically spiraling, noting how absurd it is that a mere level 70 human could possess such a terrifying skill, honestly questioning whether humanity has already become this strong. Still, despite the shock, he refuses to back down. He quickly tells the others they absolutely can't let this kid ruin the dignity of their elemental dragons. And just like that, all 4 dragons act at once. They launch a combined attack, and Ailey immediately warns Lin that what they're about to use is their fusion skill, an elemental storm, and tells him to be careful because the power will be immense. The next moment, the attack crashes down, all 4 elements merging together into something far more destructive. A massive explosion erupts, and everything turns white. The skellies got blasted in every direction. Meanwhile, as the dust slowly settles, Lin casually observes that this combined attack actually resembles his skeletal archmage's attack, just on a bigger scale. Of course, the dragons have no idea what he's thinking, and even if they did, that would be the least of their concerns right now. Because when the dust settles, Lin is still standing there. For a brief moment, the dragons genuinely start to wonder if he's even human. Geva snorts, clearly frustrated, remarking that they can't even go all out because of the rules restricting them. Otherwise, he would have made sure Lin got a real taste of their power. Anyway, Lin simply asks whether time is up, casually wondering if he's passed everything, which Ailey confirms that he has. Then she presents him with 2 choices. He can take his reward and leave, or continue on to the next trial. Furthermore, she explains that if he succeeds, the rewards will double. But if he fails, the consequences won't be light either, because at best he gets nothing. At worst, he could lose his life. She tells him to think it through carefully. Lin, being Lin, doesn't hesitate for even a second and chooses to continue. Ailey reflects briefly that given his strength, he does qualify to move forward. Then, together with the others, they release a powerful dragon roar into the sky. The sound echoes far into the distance, reverberating throughout the entire dungeon. And just like that, our guy suddenly begins to free fall. He quickly notices that his wings have been dispelled, and immediately notes that this next stage likely seals off any flight-type skills. Meanwhile, ahead of him, a staircase appears, and it's hard to count just how many steps there are. A voice follows, calmly explaining that as long as he walks up the staircase, he'll reach the arena for the next stage. Lin acknowledges this, expressing his gratitude, then says he has no intention of stopping here. After our boy breezes through the first stage, basically the opening interview, He moves on to his next stage, which, as it turns out, is climbing a staircase crackling with lightning. He makes his way up, quickly realizing the lightning is trying to blast him straight back down. However, little did they know, our guy is completely immune to lightning. So he treats the whole thing like a casual field trip, and meanwhile, the dragons watching grow increasingly confused. Ellie notes that Lin somehow seems to be speeding up, and furthermore, she wonders if something is wrong with Lord Raylan's lightning. Anyway, before long, our boy reaches the top. In front of him, a massive dragon awaits, thunder cracking wildly across its body. Lin senses immediately that this creature carries an aura just as powerful as his teacher's, perhaps already at a mid-tier divine level. He slowly approaches, and the dragon takes notice, murmuring to itself, seemingly a little surprised to see a human standing there. The dragon opens its eyes and tells him he has successfully passed and is now qualified to know its name. It rises slowly, then says its name is Raylan, a thunder elemental dragon. Its massive frame and overwhelming aura would have most people's legs giving out instantly, but Lin remains composed and even goes on to ask about this stage. Raylan remarks that, according to the system of this world, he should be around level 70, and he notes he's quite curious how someone like that managed to pass the first stage. That phrase, this world, immediately catches Lin off guard. He pauses, then reflects, wondering if there are actually many worlds out there. In other words, beyond the one he knows, could there really be others? And if so, what are they like? Do they have humans too? But before he can ask anything further, a massive bolt of lightning suddenly strikes Raylan. The dragon lets out a roar, clearly in intense pain, as burn marks spread across its body and smoke pours from its mouth. He tells Lin not to repeat what he just said to anyone else, then makes a little threat. Lin understands the warning and assures him he won't speak a word of it. However, that clearly isn't enough. In the very next moment, Lin feels a surge of killing intent, so overwhelming and suffocating, unlike anything he has ever experienced. At that moment, without a doubt, this very dragon genuinely intends to kill him. Raylan rises into the sky and declares that only the dead can keep secrets, but decides to give Lin two choices: either be killed on the spot or stay here forever. Now that's just straight up scammy, but honestly, it's still not enough to truly scare our boy. Lin goes on and asks whether Raylan isn't afraid of punishment from the dungeon, noting that the rules here should be restricting him anyway. However, Raylan simply replies that none of that matters. Furthermore, he says he now has a reason he absolutely must kill Lin. Our boy, unfazed as ever, just tells him to forget it, adding that it's not going to happen. Raylan declares that he is a divine-level thunder dragon and notes that killing a mere level 70 human professional would be no harder than crushing an ant. As if to prove his point, he immediately drowns Lin in a devastating lightning attack. And yet, no effect whatsoever. Raylan freezes, eyes wide, and asks how this is even possible. Lin doesn't respond. Instead, he decides to show him something. He calmly takes out a scale, none other than a scale from Antares. At that, Raylan trembles slightly, gulps nervously, and asks, almost stuttering, how Lin managed to get his hands on something like that. Lin, however, doesn't answer directly. Instead, he reveals that not only is he immune to all lightning attacks, but now, with this in his possession, he asks whether Raylan still thinks he can kill him. Meanwhile, Raylan drops back to the ground, staring at Lin like an enraged bull. He huffs heavily a few times, clearly frustrated, and Lin casually reassures him that he won't spread anything he heard, then tells him to just continue with the trial. That, of course, only makes things worse. Raylan remarks irritably that if Lin is already immune to lightning, then there's nothing left to test, meaning Lin has, once again, passed the stage. The big fella then turns away, ignores our boy completely, and lies back down for his nap. At the same time, a new staircase appears, this one leading even higher. Lin takes a few steps forward before he gets going. He pats Raylan on the hand and tells him thanks. Raylan looks slightly surprised, lets out another annoyed huff, and shuts his eyes again. With that, our guy continues upward, and as he climbs, strands of energy begin flowing into his body. Meanwhile, the system keeps popping up notifications at intervals, noting that he's gaining power of light. His light element resistance cap is increasing by 1%, and aside from all that, he was also receiving 10 million experience points each time. This comes as a pleasant surprise even for Lin, as he realizes that not only is his resistance to light elements improving, but furthermore, His soul is steadily strengthening, and his level is rising along with it. By the time he reaches the very top, he's granted another 30 million experience points, along with an additional 3% to his light element resistance cap, finally maxing it out completely and achieving full immunity to light element. This makes the whole trip completely worth it because, after all, that final chunk of experience pushes him to level 71, and now, following poison and lightning, he's fully immune to light as well. He reflects that this dungeon really is a massive stroke of fortune, practically hitting the jackpot over and over. Well, that's what you get from being the MC. Meanwhile, in the distance, another enormous figure slowly rises. The being introduces itself as Sanctus, a holy elemental dragon. Lin immediately notices that this one feels even stronger than the last. He shows his respect, then quickly moves on to ask about the trial. At the same time, he points out that he's already completely immune to light, so if this stage is just about attacking him, then frankly it wouldn't mean much. Sanctus doesn't argue. He simply gestures into the distance. Lin follows the direction and sees a castle surrounded by a glowing barrier of holy light. Sanctus explains that the task is simple. No matter the method, Lin only needs to break through the barrier. It sounds easy, and honestly, Lin thinks so too. He quickly notices that the no-fly restriction here is gone. Meanwhile, without wasting time, he takes to the air and summons his headless knights. He mounts one and tells the rest to charge straight ahead. The Skellies activate their skills simultaneously and slam into the barrier, but nothing happens. Worse, the recoil sends cracks spreading across their bodies. Lin immediately realizes what he's dealing with. This isn't just your average barrier, it's also infused by the power of law. So naturally, he needs to figure out a way. He reflects that if the barrier is created by law, then it should be broken by law as well. So, naturally, the poison god essence blood comes in clutch once again. Lin tosses it upward and it splashes directly onto the barrier. Sanctus immediately senses the aura of law within it, and just like that, the poison begins corroding the barrier from the outside. Meanwhile, the big fella clearly has a lot of questions. However, this is Lin's method, and that alone is enough. Sanctus notes that the trial is considered cleared, which means Lin is entitled to take 10 soul crystals as his reward. He doesn't even get to finish his sentence because our guy cuts him off, says he doesn't need them, and chooses to continue. Sanctus pauses, then moves closer and seriously tells him those are soul crystals, each one containing pure soul power, capable of elevating a person's soul and even helping him level up. But Lin simply repeats himself for the second time that he will continue. And just like that, the barrier ahead dissipates. The castle gates slowly swing open, and Lin makes his way inside. Meanwhile, all the dragons gather nearby. They watch the gates open and ask if Lin really passed. Sanctus gives a slight nod. Gevas, who also uses poison, immediately senses the lingering aura and notes that it's unmistakably divine-level poison. He clicks his tongue and remarks that this human kid really has something up his sleeve. The others watch as the gates close. They note that it's been a very long time since anyone reached this final stage, all the while being curious how far Lin will go. But at the same time, they all quietly hope he actually makes it. Then, the scene shifts. Lin steps into a grand hall, mist curling through the air. As he moves toward the center, he suddenly spots a dragon, completely different from the others, much older, much stronger. He knew for a fact that this was a divine dragon. Not just a divine-level dragon, but a literal divine dragon. The being slowly opens its eyes, already sensing a familiar aura lingering inside of Lin. Just then, the scale of Antares suddenly rises out of Lin's storage space. The divine dragon observes it and remarks that it seems Lin has already encountered one of his kin. For the first time, Lin truly feels the overwhelming gap in power between himself and another being, something he never experienced before, not even when facing Antares. He pauses, then wonders, could this be the dragon god himself? Meanwhile, on Antares' side, he immediately senses the activation of the scale. Delighted, he projects a phantom through it. The divine dragon smiles and remarks that it's him after all. Antares, however, seemed a little surprised that he woke up, though the big guy shows his respect and offers a formal greeting, noting it has been a long time. The dragon god responds with a smile, saying it has indeed been a long time, addressing him casually as Little Antares. Lin, standing off to the side, listens to the exchange, and meanwhile can't help but think it's surreal, someone as ancient as Antares actually being called Little. The dragon god quickly understands that Antares sent Lin here to retrieve the 2 dragon balls, and Antares admits it. When asked about all 16 of them, Antares says he has recovered 10, including the 2 right now, then that would be 12 altogether. When asked if he knows where the remaining ones are, Antares shakes his head, noting that he has suspicions, but nothing certain. The dragon god falls silent for a moment, then explains that what happened back then left him with no choice. Antares doesn't respond. He simply closes his eyes, clearly doesn't want to talk about it. The 2 don't continue the conversation. Instead, the dragon god notes that he will allow this human boy to take the Dragon Balls back. However, he adds that they may not meet again in the future, and furthermore, he tells Antares to take care of himself. Antares slowly opens his eyes and gives the dragon god one last look, as if he wants to say something. However, in the end, he remains silent, a trace of sadness settling over him. Meanwhile, the dragon god shifts his attention back to Lin and asks whether he is a friend of Antares. Lin nods and admits it, saying he is indeed his friend. The dragon god seems slightly surprised, even chuckles a little, noting that he didn't expect little Antares to have a friend at all. Furthermore, he remarks that this must mean Lin is quite special. Without hesitation, he hands over the 2 Dragon Balls, explaining that they originally belonged to Antares anyway and should be returned to him. Lin bows in gratitude, and just like that, his trial officially comes to an end. The dragon god notes that Lin's rewards will be granted shortly. Meanwhile, he also asks Lin to do him one favor, which our boy agrees to immediately. At that moment, the dragon god's massive body begins to shrink, and soon, a sphere-like thing with patterns on it appears before him. He tells Lin to deliver it to Antares. Lin isn't entirely sure what it is. However, he can't help but suspect that it might be the dragon god's own Dragon Ball. He doesn't fully understand their purpose, but clearly they must be incredibly important. Otherwise, Antares wouldn't have gone to such lengths to retrieve them. As he ponders all this, the dragon god's body begins to fade away. In his final moment, he quietly asks Lin to pass along an apology. Lin looks up, and for a brief instant, it almost seems like the dragon god leaves behind a single tear. That tear falls into the ground below, sending ripples across the surface. In that instant, a wave of sorrow crashes over him. It's that kind of suffocating sadness that he feels like he understands. Deep within the dragon god's heart, there must have been endless bitterness and helplessness. Sadness stirred many of Lin's memories. What he had thought long forgotten now appeared vividly clear. He thought of his late grandmother, and all sorts of emotions were drawn out. A moment later, the system notification appears, stating that the Dragon King's dungeon has been cleared. And just like that, Lin is teleported back. No surprises here. Those cheeky bastards are already waiting for him. Countless dark figures fill the sky, among them several Dragon Kings. One of them immediately declares that Lin has been found, and furthermore, for the sake of the ancestral dragon's essence blood, they promise to grant him a painless death. Then, they charge. Meanwhile, Lin hasn't fully come back from what he just experienced. His emotions are pushed to an extreme, teetering on the edge. He lifts his head, eyes filled with killing intent, staring straight at the incoming enemies. He clenches his teeth, notes that he's in a very bad mood, and since they've come to him on their own, they might as well die. We rarely see our boy like this before, and honestly, it's not looking good for anyone on the receiving end. Our boy has no plans to hold back, nor any mercy. If anyone's to blame, it's those unlucky bastards themselves for showing up in the wrong place at the wrong time, messing with the wrong guy. Lin doesn't waste a second. He summons every single skellies he has, including the Skeletal King. And meanwhile, the sky just drops and darkness totally blankets the entire area. The dragons glance around, confused at first, asking what's going on. But the moment they spot the Skeletal King, that confidence vanishes real quick. Meanwhile, our boy follows up immediately with a skeletal prison. He's not playing around this time, saying he's gonna wipe them all out. Instantly, massive bone shackles erupt and lock every dragon in place. Activating mighty soldiers and overcharge, he followed up with soul summons, and the big boy unleashes a poison skill right after. A massive AoE tears straight through the dragon warriors, wiping them out in seconds. Corpses start dropping one after another. Unfortunately, that combo still isn't enough to finish off the Dragon Kings. Realizing they might have seriously underestimated Lin, they curse under their breath. Then, without hesitation, they activate Bloodline Awakening and transform into humanoid forms. Weapons up, they charge again, thinking they can still turn this around, but they can't be more wrong. All it takes is one single slash from the Skeletal King. One of the Dragon Kings raises his weapon to block, but before he can even make contact, he gets blasted away. The impact alone leaves them stunned. They can't believe the fact that them being divine level and still getting crushed by a mere summon. One of them barely steadies himself, blood already pouring out, and he tells the others to gang up on Lin while he takes care of the Skeletal King by himself. With that, he charges, swinging his weapon with everything he's got. And surprisingly, it actually works, just enough to knock the Skeletal King back a few steps. Seeing that, one of them gets cocky. He glances at Lin and asks what tricks he's got left now. Meanwhile, our guy is completely unfazed, looking like everything's still under control. He simply uses Undead Gaze, and suddenly, the already dark sky turns even gloomier. Then, out of nowhere, a massive eyeball forms in the air, staring straight down at the battlefield. The Dragon Kings stop in their tracks and flames erupt across their bodies. They drop their weapons, clutching their heads, screaming. Their souls feel like they're being burned alive. Meanwhile, Lin calmly moves into position above them. He looks down and remarks that they might as well stay on this continent forever. Then he summons skeletal spears. He aims, throws, and lands a clean hit. The spear pierces straight through a Dragon King and pins him to the ground. Then another, and another. By this point, it's not even a fight anymore, but a massacre. Dodging wasn't even an option. They couldn't do a damn thing, and their soul were scorching. Meanwhile, the one still holding off the Skeletal King turns back, takes in the sight, and freezes. And for a moment, he just can't process it. The entire force, all of them together, and somehow, they still lost. Just then, the Skeletal King's body starts to dissipate. The last Dragon King got confused, wondering what just happened. For a split second, he thinks maybe, just maybe, he's got a chance. But he wasn't expecting what was coming next. Ever since Lin hit level 70, the Skeletal Sharpshooter's ability quietly upgraded, from simple soul lock to full-on soul execution. The boys don't show up often, but when paired with Undead Gaze, the Dragon Kings might as well be standing still targets. And right on cue, arrows start raining down from above. A storm of arrows crashes onto the Dragon Kings, already pinned to the ground by bone spears, making the whole scene even more one-sided. Meanwhile, Lin decides to wrap things up. He casually uses Corpse Explosion, and honestly, it's overkill, but efficient. He takes advantage of the Dragon Warrior's body, and soon, explosions ripple across the battlefield one after another. The ground shakes, shockwaves surge outward, and everything gets deleted on the spot. And through all of it, Lin just stands there, watching like an absolute menace. He just wiped out an entire army of dragons, and there's not a single emotion in his eyes. After a while, he returns to the ground. As the dust settles, there's nothing left, just scattered crystals lying across the ground. But to his surprise, there's actually a survivor, the lucky one from earlier. The guy's barely holding on, covered in wounds, gripping his weapon just to stay upright. He's so weak he can't even properly speak, just muttering Lin's name under his breath. But Lin doesn't care what he had to say and straight up tells him that a corpse shouldn't be talking anyway. Then, without another word, he finishes him off with soul flames. The Dragon King doesn't even get the chance to scream, getting deleted before any sound can come out. In the end, Lin levels up and furthermore racks up enough military merit to push himself straight to 5-star Divine General. Now that the chaos is over, all that's left is the good part, checking out the loot. Lin casually strolls across, picking up the scattered crystals one by one. He examines them closely, almost appreciating them, and remarks that these dragons were actually pretty generous, not only pushing him all the way to 5-star Divine General, but also handing over a ton of experience on top of that. Meanwhile, he notes to himself that with these crystals, the life core for the scepter should be mostly repaired by now. That said, still, He reminds himself not to get sidetracked as he still has to return the Dragon Balls to Antares. After that, he plans to come back and look for the primordial secret realm. Anyway, he activates the scale and gets teleported back to the upper level. But this time, he ends up directly behind Antares, which means he gets a full view of the big guy's backside, and honestly, he's not quite sure how to feel about that. Meanwhile, Antares turns around and asks why he's back so soon. Lin explains calmly that he got what was needed, and just to avoid any unnecessary complications, he figured it'd be safer to return first. Then he takes out the 2 Dragon Balls and hands them over. Antares swallows them in one go, then casually says thanks. Then Lin brings out the item left behind by the Dragon God. He tells Antares that the Dragon God asked him to deliver this, and also pass along a message. The moment Antares sees the Dragon Pearl, he gets a little emotional. But when Lin adds that the Dragon God wanted to say sorry, Antares freezes. He looks like he can't even process it. Then suddenly, he lets out a massive roar. A terrifying wave of energy explodes outward. The ground cracks, and the entire upper level starts shaking violently. Meanwhile, every single creature in the area, even the bosses, peeks out, trembling, while the weaker monsters are desperately trying to hide. Antares, meanwhile, seems to be venting everything all at once, and through it all, Lin just stands there quietly, watching. After a few minutes, Antares finally calms down, but Lin noticed a single tear at the corner of Antares' eye. Antares quickly wipes it away, regaining his composure, but he doesn't plan to share anything between him and the Dragon God. Lin doesn't press either. He's not that nosy, but he wanted to know more about the dragons. At that, Antares lets out a dismissive scoff. He explains that if Lin is talking about the ones he just killed, then they don't even qualify as real dragons. In fact, he notes, they're nothing more than lowly creatures, not even worthy of being called subdragons or drakes, because only those with the ancestral dragon bloodline can truly be called dragons. Furthermore, he explains that the Dragon God stands at the very top, the king of all dragons. It possesses the ancestral bloodline and has refined it to an incredibly high level, making it essentially invincible. Below that, the hierarchy splits into pure blood dragons and mixed blood dragons. Mixed blood dragons spend their entire lives evolving, trying to move closer to pure blood. Meanwhile, pure blood dragons continue evolving toward the ancestral level. And as for the elemental dragons Lin encountered earlier, Antares tells him those were just mixed bloods, still in the process of purifying their bloodline and awakening their true power. Hearing all that, Lin starts to feel a bit confused. He recalls that he's heard of dragons with ancestral bloodlines before, and more than that, he's actually seen them, for example, the Tartar brother or the Dragon Kings who used ancestral awakening. If he's not mistaken, even the Dragon Emperor should have that kind of bloodline. At that, Antares lets out a cold snort. He explains that, back in the day, there was a foolish pure-blood dragon who died while trying to awaken the ancestral bloodline. Part of its flesh fell into another world, where primitive creatures devoured it, and as a result, they mutated, inheriting fragments of that bloodline. Eventually, those creatures started calling themselves dragons. Lin immediately pieces it together and everything clicks. No wonder Antares, and even those elemental dragons looked down on the so-called dragon race. Turns out they weren't even the real deal, but that's not even the full story. Antares goes on to explain that in the true dragon race, even the lowest mixed-blood dragon is born at divine-level strength. Meanwhile, the elemental dragons Lin encountered were nothing more than dungeon clones. And as for that so-called Dragon Emperor, he remarks that no matter how hard it tries, it'll never reach the Supreme Divine because of this unbridgeable difference in bloodline. Lin reflects that humans, after all, have produced a Supreme Divine level before. So what about human bloodlines? Before he can go too deep, Antares suddenly knocks him on the head, snapping him out of it. Since the Dragon God asked him to deliver a message, he says, there should have been a reward too. So what did he get? That's when Lin pulls out a dragon-shaped crystal. He admits he can feel that it's something extraordinary, but honestly he has no idea what it actually does. But the moment Antares sees it, his eyes widen in shock. He immediately recognizes it, a dragon soul crystal. He said he didn't expect the old geezer to actually hand something like this over. He explains that inside the crystal is something called Dragon Soul Essence, basically a concentrated form of their soul power. With it, one can elevate their soul directly, with zero side effects. Furthermore, a crystal this concentrated is packed with the power of laws. Even just keeping it nearby makes it easier to comprehend those laws over time. Whether it's the crystal itself or the essence inside, Antares notes, both are considered priceless treasures. Lin finally understands, but Antares isn't done yet. He adds that Dragon Soul essence also has tiers. The lowest is 3-colored, then 5-colored, and the one Lin received is 7-colored, already carrying a trace of ancestral dragon aura. That alone makes it extremely good, and frankly, the best the dragon race would normally ever give away, which shows the dragon god holds Lin in high regard. As for the absolute peak, the 9-colored version, that's something they never give out. But, while the old dragon god might not be willing to part with the best, Antares clearly has other ideas. Without another word, he brings the crystal in front of him and channels his own soul energy into it. Lin watches instinctively, overwhelmed by the sheer amount of soul energy radiating from it. What shocks him even more is realizing that Antares is forcibly upgrading the crystal's quality using his own soul power. The energy keeps pouring in. Soon, the crystal begins to shine, its colors growing richer, more vibrant, until finally it transforms into a full 9-colored dragon soul crystal. Antares exhales and casually remarks that it's barely acceptable. Then he just tosses it to Lin like it's nothing. Lin, of course, knows exactly what to say in moments like this. He tells him that, as expected of the strongest Antares, that was seriously impressive. Antares snorts, acting all nonchalant, saying it's nothing special. He just hasn't made one of these in years, so he's a bit rusty. Now, with such an incredible treasure in hand, Lin still doesn't know how to use it. Antares keeps it simple, saying that since it enhances the soul, then naturally you use your soul to interact with it. So Lin tries. The moment his soul touches the crystal, it's almost like he's pulled into another space. And there he sees a dragon. But before he can even react, the dragon bites him. Lin immediately cuts the connection, clutching his head in pain. Meanwhile, Antares is off to the side, almost laughing his ass off. He lets out a smug little laugh, basically telling Lin he fell for it. He was just about to mention that Lin's soul is still too weak and that he shouldn't rush it, but our guy doesn't plan to back down. He tells himself that this is his mental space. There's no way he's letting anything act wild in here. This time, fully prepared, he focuses completely, and then reaches his hand toward the rainbow-colored dragon. Lin returned to his mental space for the second time and snatched the rainbow dragon with one hand and tells the little guy to behave. Then he squeezes just a bit harder, and finally the thing settles down. Meanwhile, a surge of energy suddenly floods into his body, and Antares goes wide-eyed, clearly stunned. He notes, almost in disbelief, that Lin is somehow enduring the overwhelming soul force of the Dragon Soul Crystal while only sitting at level 72. A while later, Lin opens his eyes again, but something feels off. Strangely enough, he doesn't feel any noticeable improvement, especially since his soul power didn't seem to increase at all. Antares, still appalled, quickly explained that the law power contained inside that Dragon Soul Crystal is way too massive. He remarks that Lin will need time to accumulate, to comprehend, and more importantly, to slowly digest it. Lin takes that in, nods, and says he'll just take it slow. Meanwhile, just as Lin is still processing everything, Antares casually taps his fingers and opens a teleportation portal. He tells Lin that he had already gotten the good stuff, so he might as well head back, adding that he's feeling tired and could take a nap. Lin, however, clearly has more to say, but before he can even get the words out, the portal snaps shut. A moment later, Antares looks off into the distance and mutters to himself. He asks why that old man left the inheritance to him, wondering if there wasn't someone better suited. Even after tens of thousands of years, he still hasn't let it go. He admits that even though the dragon god gave him the inheritance pearl, forgiveness was never part of the deal. He claims the dragon god wasn't a good father, and anyway, he wasn't exactly a good son either. Then, suddenly, he erupts. With a roar that feels more like pure venting than anything else, he swears that once he gets out, he'll storm the ancestral land himself. Whatever they refuse to give him, he'll take it back with his own hands. He says he'll turn the heavens upside down, stain the sky in blood. Furthermore, if it comes down to it, he won't hesitate to drown the ancestral land in dragon blood. Meanwhile, far across the lower level, deep within the Wind Thunder continent where Lin currently is, our guy can still feel Antares' anger. It spreads across the entire eternal trial ground, pressing down like a storm, which only makes him even more curious about the relationship between Antares and that divine dragon. At the same time, he knows better. Even if he wanted to help, he admits his current strength just isn't enough. Anyway, he doesn't dwell on it for long. When the time is right, Antares will tell him everything. Right now, the guy probably just wants to be left alone. So Lin looks ahead and shrugs, deciding that, as for himself, he might as well grind some levels. Around him, massive tumbleweed-like monsters roll about, and he immediately decides this is the perfect farming spot. He summons his skeleton army, and a few skeletal berserkers charge straight for the biggest one. They land a clean hit, except it does absolutely nothing. The attack just bounces off. Then, in response, the creature fires back, piercing straight through the skeletons like they're made of paper. Well, that clearly didn't go as planned. Lin notes that even Rampage Annihilation deals so little damage, which only means the monster's stats are insanely high. So he casts a detection spell and quickly realizes what he's dealing with. A level 86 world boss called Windflower. Impressive stats, insane vitality, and, on top of that, a special trait that heavily reduces physical damage. Just as Lin is thinking through his next move, the boss launches another attack. Massive wind blades tear through the area, flying in all directions and blasting the skeletons backward. All right then. Plan A is officially out. He remarks that if that's the case, it's time to switch things up. With a quick decision, he merges the skeletons, and soon enough a throne materializes. Then, making a dramatic entrance, the skeletal king appears. Without hesitation, the big guy charges forward and delivers a devastating strike straight into the boss. The hit lands hard, serious damage, but still not enough to finish it off. Meanwhile, more of these Windflower bosses appeared from nowhere and crashed wildly across the battlefield. And then, suddenly, pink petals begin bursting out from within the bosses, drifting down before landing right on top of the skeletal king. One petal detonates, then another, followed by several more explosions. When our boy checks on the skeletal king again, he immediately notices cracks are spreading all across its body, which definitely catches him off guard. But meanwhile, the Lich General steps in, casting Legion Healing, and just like that, the big guy is patched up in no time. Without a second wasted, the skeletal king charges in for round 2, activating Limitless Defense as it barrels forward. The Windflower bosses don't hold back either. They swarm him all at once, piling on from every direction. But honestly, that's exactly what Lin was waiting for. He notes the perfect setup and makes his move. He activates Undead Gaze, and a massive eye manifests in the sky. Instantly, the weaker mobs drop dead on the spot, while the 6 remaining world bosses all take a heavy hit. At the same time, a huge number of petals begin falling off their bodies. Lin presses the advantage, and with a coordinated push, he finally wipes them all out. But the moment the bosses wither away, something strange happens. More petals burst outward, drifting upward into the sky. Lin first watches with curiosity, then almost immediately his expression tightens. A sphere begins forming above him, expanding rapidly until it blankets the entire sky in a dark red hue. He quickly uses a detection spell, and what he sees is definitely not expected. Apparently, it's called Windflower Blood Moon. Across the entire Wind Thunder continent, the Blood Moon rises, casting its eerie glow. Everyone, humans, demons alike, looks up at the sky, confused, not understanding what's happening. Meanwhile, Lin is the only one actually seeing its stats. Level 90. 6 million in total attributes, absurd-sounding skills, and, of course, even more terrifying special traits. He remarks, almost in disbelief, that this thing isn't just a phenomenon, it's a special type of creature. Not to mention it's also giving off a really dangerous vibe. Lin doesn't hesitate and immediately orders the skeletal king to strike. The big guy leaps up and lands a clean hit, slicing straight through the creature. For a moment it looks promising. Petals start falling in large numbers. But then, just as quickly, everything reverses. The fallen petals rise back up, reattaching as if nothing ever happened. And then things get worse. A massive wave of pollen begins raining down from the sky. Lin instantly senses danger, but he's just a split second too late. An explosion erupts right in front of him. That's the Blood Moon's first skill, Infinite Pollen Explosion. Luckily, damage transfer and lifelink kick in just in time, saving him from the worst of it. But he barely gets a second to breathe before more petals begin descending, this time right above the headless knights. At first, nothing happens. Then, instead of exploding, the petals root themselves into the ground, and in an instant, thick vines burst out from beneath the surface, expanding rapidly and binding several headless knights tightly in place. This is the second skill, Petal Devour. Not only are the knights restrained, but their power is actively being drained as well. Lin frowns, and then notices something even more shocking. He senses the power of laws. That makes no sense. From what he knows, law power is something only level 95 beings can even begin to have a glimpse of. But this thing is only level 90. So how is it doing this? He looks up at the Blood Moon again, trying to figure it out, but finds nothing. There are no clues and no answers. He knows one thing for sure. He can't drag this out any longer. So he decides to go all in. Activating Mighty Soldiers, he pushes everything to the limit. The Skeletal King's stats surge, and it swings again with overwhelming force. This time, perhaps sensing danger, the Blood Moon reacts. Countless roots rush toward it, trying to shield it from the attack. But it's useless. The swordlight cuts clean through everything in its path, slicing the roots apart and landing another solid hit. Lin immediately follows up. Now's the moment to finish it before it fully regenerates. He casts Undead Gaze again, disrupting its recovery just enough to slow it down. Still, he notes the effect isn't strong enough. Petals are already starting to regroup. So he switches tactics. He pulls out the bone spear and hurls it upward with everything he's got. It pierces straight through the Blood Moon, interrupting its regeneration once more. Meanwhile, the Skeletal King unleashes an elemental rampage. A massive mushroom cloud erupts into the sky. The shockwave tears across the battlefield, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. And then, finally, the system notification appears. The Windflower Blood Moon has been defeated. Lin gains a juicy 120 million experience. On top of that, he receives several rare rewards: the Heart of Windflower, Windflower Essence, and Windflower Seeds. The heart can forge legendary-grade weapons, the essence can upgrade accessories, and the seeds, well, those can be cultivated by a divine-level breeder to grow windflowers with mysterious and powerful effects. All that being said, our boy doesn't even bother checking the rewards. Instead, he immediately rushes straight into the crater. Compared to the windflower drops, he's way more interested in that Blood Moon. And sure enough, right at the center, he spots it. A small disc quietly rests there. He picks it up, takes a closer look, and then realizes what it is. It's actually a weapon left behind by the god of bloodlust. Suddenly everything clicks. That faint trace of law power? Yeah, now it makes perfect sense. He reflects that if that Blood Moon had been at an even higher level, it might have been able to straight up devour all of his attacks. And if that happened, not only would it be impossible to kill, it would have turned into a massive problem. The item itself isn't really useful for him, so he plans to just hand it over to his teachers later. With that decided, he tosses it into his storage space and moves on, already looking for the next place to grind. Meanwhile, not long after he leaves, a group of demons arrives at the scene. They scan the area, examining the aftermath, and quickly realize that a battle between two divine-level beings had happened here. That alone is enough to make them uneasy. One of them asks when someone so powerful showed up here in the lower level. But the more concerning part is that the aura doesn't belong to their demon race. That means only one thing: it's human. The group goes quiet for a moment. Then one of them suggests they should keep a low profile for the time being. Meanwhile, Lin has already moved on and returned to the territory of the Thunder Trees. From what he's gathered, aside from the Windflower, the Thunder Trees are basically the most iconic world boss on this continent. Not far ahead, he spots a Thunder Tree that clearly stands out from the rest. That's got to be the king. Now rocking a fresh new outfit, well, at least for a moment, our boy looks it over and admits the boss is definitely strong. Not quite divine level, but still more than enough to push him to level 73. So, naturally, he gets to work. He summons his skeleton army once again, although for some reason he's somehow back in his old plain white shirt. Anyway, The skeletal king is called forth, makes its entrance, and immediately charges straight toward the world boss. Lin steps into the Thunder Tree territory, and the place notices him immediately. Several lightning eagles, all level 75, spot him and charge in at breakneck speed, clearly thinking they've found an easy target. They do their little zap skill, but deal absolutely nothing to our boy's full lightning immunity. Still, they're annoying, and he's not here to babysit birds. A few bone spears fly out quick and clean, and the eagles drop out of the sky like they never stood a chance. Meanwhile, the skeletal king has already gotten busy, casting elemental rampage and aiming straight for the Thunder Tree King. The boss reacts fast, whipping its massive branches around to block, while lightning starts cracking beneath the ground, spreading outward and forming a massive buffer zone. Lin notes the intensity right away. If a party doesn't have at least a level 80 healer, there's no way they're tanking this. No wonder this place gets called the Wind and Thunder Continent. Anyway, things escalate, but the boss isn't the only problem. Several thunder trees begin clawing their way out of the ground, and honestly, they look creepy as hell just standing there staring. Turns out these are Thunder Tree Guardians, powerful elites you've got to deal with before even getting close to the boss. They don't waste time either. Roots burst forward as they activate their first skill, Root Entanglement. Lin takes one look and decides he's not dragging this out. He tells himself to get this over with and activates Mighty Soldiers, figuring the Skeletal King should now be able to wipe them instantly. Big Boy never disappoints and delivers. One casual swing of that massive sword slices through branches like a hot knife through butter. Another strike follows right after, cutting straight through an elite's body. The Guardians collapse, their remains sinking back into the ground, sending out a heavy shockwave that slams into the Skeletal King. Still, the boss doesn't show up. That's when Lin decided to step in as well. He orders the Skeletal King to just tear the entire forest apart. Big Boy doesn't hesitate, swinging left and right like he's mowing a lawn, carving through every remaining elite in sight. With the field cleared, Lin grins, because really, what's better than blowing things up? Corpse explosion, obviously. He triggers it, and the entire area erupts. Chain explosions ripple outward, detonating everything in sight. He notes to himself that this whole lightning forest is basically perfect for this skill, and of course the bonus experience doesn't hurt either. One blast leads to another, and another, until the explosions finally reach the Thunder Tree King. That gets its attention. The boss lets out a roar and finally makes its move. Thick vines lash out violently, followed by a concentrated lightning strike fired straight from its forehead. Lin barely reacts. He assumes it's just another useless lightning attack, thinking the thing still hasn't figured out that lightning does nothing to him. Then it hits, and suddenly, things aren't so simple. Inside his mental space, the lightning strikes him dead on. Pain surges through his head, and he instinctively clutches it, caught completely off guard. That wasn't just some random lightning strike, it was a full-on soul attack. Lin reflects that he's usually the one dishing those out, not on the receiving end. The hit lands hard, staggering him, and before he can fully recover, another one follows right behind it. No time to dodge this one. Thankfully, something kicks in at the last second. The Dragon Soul Crystal activates, transforming into a rainbow dragon inside his mental space, and just straight up devours the incoming attack. Lin exhales, feeling relieved, noting that he didn't expect the Soul Crystal to have such perks. Still, he admits he got just a bit too careless there. Anyway, payback time. Lin doesn't hesitate. He fires back with undead gaze, and a massive eye manifests mid-air, locking onto the boss. The pressure hits immediately. The Thunder Tree King starts thrashing, clearly in pain as its soul gets burned under the stare. But then, something feels off. Lin narrows his eyes, watching closely. The thing is taking the damage, sure, but it's not retreating. Not even trying to burrow underground as the elites did earlier. It's almost like it's stalling on purpose. That's when the ground starts shaking. Not a small tremor either. This one runs deep. The boss suddenly digs itself out fully, and at the same time, thick purple smoke begins seeping up from below. Lin's expression changes instantly as he senses law power. What he called real, heavy, oppressive law power. Something beneath the ground is coming up, and whatever it is, it's strong. Really strong. The aura keeps climbing, and Lin estimates it's at least level 96. Then the lightning intensifies, snapping wildly across the sky, until something finally appears. A pair of massive, claw-like hands burst out of the ground. Lin freezes for a split second, trying to process what he's even looking at, thinking to himself, what on earth is that thing? But it doesn't give him time to think. With a single casual tap, the sky darkens instantly. Winds spiral out of control, and a devastating strike crashes down from above. One of Lin's headless knights is obliterated on the spot, so fast his talent doesn't even get a chance to trigger. That's when it really hits him. A bead of sweat slides down his forehead as he tries to comprehend the sheer power in front of him. This isn't something he can casually deal with, not even close, so he makes a decision. And he cannot have that thing come out of the ground. Lin throws out the poison god's essence blood, detonating it right on top of the claw. The explosion goes off perfectly, but the claw simply closes around it, just grips it, and instantly, the energy dissipates like it was nothing. That's when Lin knows, this is bad, like really bad. The claw moves again, and Lin doesn't stick around to see what happens next. He reacts instantly, teleporting away at the last possible moment. The attack follows right after, missing him by a fraction of a second. The ground where he stood is completely destroyed, leaving behind a massive crater. By the time the claw lifts again, Lin is already gone. Meanwhile, underground, a massive eye suddenly snaps open, and the Thunder Tree King trembles. Far away, inside the ancient city, Lin reappears on the teleportation array, breathing heavily. He leans on his bone spear to stay upright, steadying himself as the adrenaline slowly fades. After a moment, he steps off and lets out a long breath of relief. He notes how lucky he was to gain the tower's recognition. It's the only reason he could teleport back here instantly. With that kind of distance, spanning multiple continents, he figures that thing shouldn't be able to track him down. He can't shake the thought. Something is terrifyingly buried beneath the Wind and Thunder continent. Something way beyond what he expected. But what Lin doesn't know is this. The creature he encountered slowly sinks back underground. Moments later, the Thunder Tree King quietly reroutes itself right above the spot where it disappeared. The ground begins to mend, stitching itself back together as if nothing had ever happened. Meanwhile, Lin can't help but feel a bit disappointed. If he had managed to take down the Thunder Tree King earlier, he probably would have leveled up by now. Since that whole unexpected situation derailed things anyway, he decides it's the perfect time to head back to the Meteorfall continent and continue searching for the primordial secret realm. The teleportation array activates, and in the next instant, he arrives at the Starlight Sea. Without wasting time, he summons his wings and glides forward at high speed. Meanwhile, he occasionally glances at the primordial rune on his hand, quietly hoping it reacts and leads him to the hidden realm. After a while, land finally comes into view. He initially assumes the secret realm isn't nearby, but just as that thought crosses his mind, the rune suddenly responds, so he heads straight toward it. When he arrives, someone else is already there. The man carries a massive greatsword on his back, and just like Lin, he also has a primordial rune in his hand. The man looks up and quickly realizes the newcomer is a human. What surprises him even more is that this young guy has 2 primordial runes. He notes to himself that in all of human history, there are barely any who could possess 2 and still be alive. The middle-aged man greets our boy first, introducing himself as Sheng Tang, level 86. Lin responds in kind, briefly introducing himself as well. Sheng Tang doesn't seem to recognize the name, but he's clearly impressed. A level 72 showing up here alone, and with 2 primordial runes no less. Definitely no joke. It doesn't take long for both of them to realize they share the same goal. However, Sheng Tang admits he's been wandering around for days, unable to make up his mind about entering the secret realm or not. When he asks what about Lin, our boy simply tells him that if he gets it, it's his luck. If not, then it's just fate. Some things, he remarks, are worth trying without overthinking. No need to hesitate at every step. That line hits harder than expected. Meanwhile, something inside Sheng Tang stirs. His aura suddenly flares as he reflects on how far he's already come. He wonders why he's been hesitating and holding himself back. The greatsword shoots off his back and lands firmly in his grip, Resting it on his shoulder, he admits he's been overthinking things this whole time, but since the secret realm only allows one person to enter at a time. So he thanks Lin sincerely. With newfound determination, he steps forward and enters the secret realm. Lin watches with a faint smile, wishing him success and noting that he'll wait here. After that, he finds a quiet spot, sits down, and enters meditation. Half a day passes. Eventually, Sheng Tang walks out. He's smiling, wide and bright, so at first glance, Lin assumes he succeeded. But that's not quite the case. Sheng Tang tells him he failed, though honestly it was expected. After all, very few people ever manage to pass these kinds of secret realms. Still, it wasn't a wasted trip. He explains that after this experience, he can finally return and focus on breaking through to the divine level without any lingering doubts. Then he pats Lin on the shoulder and wishes him luck. Before leaving, he adds one last thing. If they ever meet again, he'll definitely treat him to a drink. With that, he departs. Now, it's Lin's turn. He steps forward with a confident smile and enters the secret realm. The moment he does, a strange sense of familiarity washes over him. It feels almost identical to Jiang Yi's soul secret realm. When he opens his eyes and takes in the surroundings, everything clicks. Lin realizes Jiang Yi must have entered this place before and later recreated something similar. Meanwhile, he begins walking forward, taking in the ancient atmosphere. Not far ahead, he spots a small pavilion. The entire structure looks weathered, with cracks running along its surface, as if it has stood there for countless years. At the center, he notices a stone table, and embedded into it, a clear palm imprint. Naturally, he walks up and places his hand on it. The moment he does, the imprint lights up and activates instantly. That's when he senses immense law power. It presses in from all directions, and seconds later everything shifts, and he's dragged into a completely different space. Lin looks around and realizes he's floating, completely weightless. Not far away, he saw shadowy figures, vague and distorted. He tries to focus, but no matter how hard he looks, he can't make out their faces. Then something else catches his attention. Behind the shadow figures, someone rides an ox along a blue-colored path. The man chants a poem in a calm, rhythmic tone, then suddenly surges forward. As he moves, every shadow in his way instantly dissipates like they were never there to begin with. At that exact moment, Lin feels his primordial runes react. His vision stretches outward, expanding far beyond the space he's in. It's as if he's looking across countless planets, entire worlds flashing before his eyes. What followed was a surge of overwhelming power that flooded into his body, forcing his level up by 2 in an instant. Lin is surprised but also confused. Meanwhile, the situation doesn't give him time to think. Those shadowy figures have already surrounded him. He instinctively tries to summon his skeleton army, but nothing happens. He realized perhaps this trial isn't going to let him rely on summons. If he wants to pass, he'll have to fight using his own strength. So be it. He activates Overcharge. One of the perks of the skill, he notes, is that it allows him to use abilities belonging to his summons. Normally, he lets them do all the work, but this time is different. Our guy makes his move, uses the Headless Knight's charge skill, bursting forward in a straight line and smashing into one of the shadows, instantly destroying it. Without pausing, he follows up with Rampage Annihilation, swinging his scythe downward in a brutal arc, cleaving through a second figure. Then comes Elemental Rampage, which wipes out the remaining enemies in one sweeping attack. For a brief moment, everything goes quiet, but Lin isn't fooled. He's certain it won't be that simple. Otherwise, Sheng Tang wouldn't have failed. He figures there has to be a second wave, maybe even a third. And sure enough, he's right. More enemies begin to appear. This time, there are hundreds, more precisely hundreds of times more than before. Unlike the first wave, these shadows remain stationary at first. Then suddenly they move, and what shocks Lin the most is that they're using the Headless Knight's charge. That gets his attention, but as he continues fighting, he quickly realizes these enemies seem to only know that one skill. That, he tells himself, makes things a lot easier. He swings his scythe in a wide, devastating arc, using the Skeletal King's abilities to clear out massive chunks of what he now casually refers to as shadows. One after another, they fall. Meanwhile, he notices something interesting. Every time he eliminates a shadow, the duration of his skills extends slightly. Lin picks up on it immediately. That must be the mechanic of this secret realm. With that figured out, he pushes forward and clears the entire wave. When the last few shadows vanish, he finally exhales, noting that it took a decent amount of effort, but he already knows what's coming next, and right on cue, it begins. More shadows start forming. This time, though, they look exactly like him. Same appearance, same scythe, same aura. Each of them begins using skills Lin himself had just used. And if that wasn't bad enough, they're also mimicking his fighting style. The fight drags on for a while. Lin clashes with them repeatedly, but no matter what he tries, he can't seem to eliminate even one of them. That's when it really sinks in. He's a lot more troublesome to deal with than he thought. Still, our guy isn't out of options. He knows full well that what he's shown so far isn't everything he has. Sure, these copies can mimic his stats, his skills, even his combat style, but they can't replicate what he hasn't revealed yet. Things like divinity, or the cauldron, and many more. And honestly, seeing these fake versions of himself starts to irritate him a bit. So he stops holding back. In the next moment, he summons a bone spear and hurls it forward with everything he's got. The spear tears through one of the copies, destroying it instantly. Without hesitation, Lin dashes behind another and lands a crushing blow, taking it out as well. Now only one remains.